going to take us a while to get back into the routine, but welcome to Health and Human Services. Our first bill is Senate Bill 404, FN, Senator Whitley. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to be back, and Happy New Year. For the record, my name is Becky Whitley, and I'm honored to serve New Hampshire Senate District 15, which includes the wonderful communities of Bow, Concord, and Hopkinton. So it feels appropriate for me to introduce the first bill of the year for me, which is Senate Bill 404, which is legislation which takes yet another step towards addressing the child care shortages here in New Hampshire. As we all know, addressing child care shortages in New Hampshire remains an economic imperative in New Hampshire, both for our families, our businesses, and our potential as a state to build towards a modern economy that continues to grow as our state ages. We know that access to quality childcare allows parents to go back to the workforce or remain in the workforce. It helps our state achieve economic stability and contribute to the economy. We know that without adequate care, we won't be able to address the ongoing workforce shortages our state is facing. To put that workforce shortage into context, currently there are only 28 workers for every 100 open job positions in our state. According to recent data from the U.S. Census Bureau, 72.8% of children under age 6 have all parents in the workforce. Based on National Survey of Children's Health, 5,094 parents with children ages 0 to 5 reported job changes due to problems with childcare. That's a significant part of our workforce. This includes parents who have had to quit a job, not take a job, or greatly change their job because of problems with childcare for a child age 0 to 5. The lack of childcare is also, of course, a significant issue for New Hampshire businesses. It's impeding our businesses' ability to recruit and retain a workforce and fill critical vacancies. This is limiting opportunities for growth and stifling their potential for economic success. In order to address the childcare workforce, again, there's not one policy solution that is a panacea. This is a personal issue for so many, including myself. When my son was born, I wanted to go back to work, wasn't able to find childcare. I ended up working part-time, and my mother retired from her job, sold her house of 35 years, and moved down the street. Not everyone is lucky to have Cynthia Garland come and move down the street to take care of their children. I was. Unfortunately, as we see a federal funding cliff in the childcare sector, New Hampshire's total childcare workforce continues to shrink. And as the workforce in the childcare sector continues to shrink, that of course decreases the overall availability of care for our working families. We continue to see in particular that our childcare centers continue to lose younger workers. And of course, this is due to lower compensation and benefits. Yet those centers in New Hampshire that have been able and most effective in retaining their workers have offered subsidized childcare slots to their employees, offsetting a significant expense for their workers with children. We know that this type of benefit works. This legislation that you have before you today allows childcare workers to automatically qualify for New Hampshire's Child Care Scholarship Program. The creation of a benefit for child care workers is essential, and it's smart policy. Because wages remain so low in the sector, of course, in order to keep the cost low for our families, many of these child care workers likely already qualify for New Hampshire's Child Care Scholarship under traditional eligibility rules. I want to be clear that in New Hampshire, the median hourly wage of child care workers is only $12.99. Imagine making $12.99 an hour trying to pay your mortgage, buy groceries for your family, in addition, work and send your children to childcare. This proposed policy change would streamline the process for childcare workers and centers, capturing more eligible staff and reducing the application burden. Other states have recognize the effectiveness of this retention strategy in this bill, and they have implemented this policy. And others will speak to the success of this type of program in states like Kentucky. This is a smart and simple policy change that could make a significant difference for our New Hampshire childcare workers. Retaining needing workers, recruiting new workers who may view early education as a supportive career for raising a family in New Hampshire. So I want to go through a few numbers. I know we just recently got a fiscal note from the department. I want to say first and foremost that the Department of Health and Human Services has been a true partner in working to expand access to childcare in New Hampshire, and we continue to work with them. Because this hearing is so early in the session, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I will note that in terms of numbers, how many people are we talking about? I think we're still sort of thinking through and getting data about how many workers this will impact. But I have some data from the Bipartisan Policy Center that the total childcare workforce in New Hampshire is currently estimated at 5,150 workers. So that's the pool that we're talking about. And of those 5,150, half are of childbearing age or in childbearing years. So half of 5,000, so around 2,500. So presently, the largest share of childcare workers are between the ages of 20 to 24. So 23 of the total workforce are between ages 20 and 24. However, more than half of these workers leave by the age of 25. So those are the folks that we're trying to keep to retain. Retention of this population beyond age 25 would have a significant impact on the availability. So again, we continue to work through the numbers, how much this will cost. We also know, we understand, we've been working with the department that actual CCDF dollars can't be used for this purpose. So that means, just as a reminder, CCDF is our Child Care Scholarship Program. It's a federal program. We get state dollars with state investment. And although, I agree with DHHS that CCDF has some limitations, we also know that the federal government has allowed for waivers. So we know that the CCDF program at the federal government has allowed lead agencies like DHHS to apply for requests for temporary relief from program requirements, temporary waivers of program requirements. So these are things that we are all working through in conversation with DHHS and the federal government. So because of that, we will be producing an amendment in collaboration with DHHS to make sure that we are ensuring we can maximize federal dollars while still complying with requirements. And what we may be able to do is to disregard, instead of doing sort of creating a categorical eligibility for childcare workers under the scholarship program, to do more of a process where we're disregarding parents' income. Again, this is complicated stuff. I appreciate the partnership, and I look forward to working with the department and the committee to get this policy across the finish line. So I am happy to take any questions, but there are so many folks behind me that will speak more technically to this issue and also to their own personal experience, including this little angel. I just want to recognize how quiet this little angel has been. My child
It's
would
only
never.
during when you were speaking.
Never would my child have been so quiet. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your consideration of this bill.
I do have a
Yes.
Do you have a question?
Not right now.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Can you just go through a little bit of how this works when you say the scholarship program? Because as I was reading this the other day, I wasn't sure who was getting the scholarship.
Yes.
So can you just kind of go through a technical aspect of how it works?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that question, because it is technical.
Mhm.
So the Child Care Scholarship is funded by CCDF dollars. It's the block grant. So essentially, we get a block grant from the federal government to pay for the Child Care Scholarship Program along with state investment. So in the last budget cycle, the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, raised the income eligibility for our scholarship program to make sure we're capturing all the families that need it. So what this bill would essentially create a benefit, a categorical eligibility that childcare workers are able to participate in the Child Care Scholarship Program. So sort of an automatic benefit.
Is that when they're going to school for to be childcare workers?
When they're actually in the field.
Okay.
So when they're actual childcare workers, they would have to be employed, right, by a childcare facility. There is no requirement that that family go to the childcare facility where they work. They have some flexibility. So if you live in Hampstead, but you work in Hopkinton, it doesn't have to be at the place you work, but it is only for childcare workers. And I believe there is a requirement that the center also take childcare scholarship, which is an important sort of policy decision. So again, it's not every childcare worker that will automatically get this new benefit. It's only that small group that doesn't already qualify for the scholarship program. Because wages are so low, most of them already qualified. But this is an added benefit to start keeping those 20 to 25-year-olds that we need to retain. Thank you for that question.
And how long does the scholarship last until they go over the salary range?
So currently, right, it's an income threshold, but this
Okay.
would be a benefit while the parent is in the childcare workforce. Thank you
Okay.
for that question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a couple of people that are in support, but they didn't put down whether they wanted to speak or not. And that's Marianne Porter and Shannon Tremblay. Are you, no? Okay. Okay. So with that, Karen Lott Hill, is it? Sorry, if I pronounce it wrong.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Karen Leo Hill. I'm a 19-year city councilor in Lebanon, where I had the privilege to serve with your colleague, Senator Prentice, for 12 years. And like Senator Prentice, I'm also a former mayor of Lebanon. So I have had the opportunity to see the childcare crisis up close and personal from the perspective of a city councilor. I serve on the Economic Development Commission, and what I've heard consistently from businesses in Lebanon and throughout the Upper Valley over the last almost 20 years are two challenges consistently: affordable housing and childcare. And access to childcare is a real impediment for the growth of businesses, for recruitment of employees, and for retention of employees as well, and particularly hitting women in the workforce in particular. The City of Lebanon actually is tackling this childcare crisis head on. We are working in collaboration with the private sector, and we are hoping to build a 200-seat childcare facility in the City of Lebanon because the need is so great. We, as one of the larger employers in the area, see this as an issue for our own workforce as well. And we know that, like all of the businesses, access to childcare is going to be an issue for the childcare facility that we are preparing to build. So I'm here to encourage you to support this legislation. I think that this is very important, an important tool in the toolkit to address the childcare crisis in New Hampshire. It will address first and foremost the crisis in childcare, the childcare sector, but in so doing, it will also address the larger workforce issue that we have, as well as Senator Whitley pointed out in her introductory remarks. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm just primarily here to offer my perspective as to how necessary and important this legislation is. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Prentice.
It's a problem I had. It's kind of like the T-Rex syndrome. I actually just wanted to bring up, while Councilor Hill was with us, I was madly scrolling through because I remembered reading in the Valley News this morning that one of our local large childcare providers, the Carter Community Center, the building association, is actually going to be closing down. They're only going to be offering after school. And in the article it said, staffing shortages in childcare driven largely by low wages in the industry, strain programs financially as well as operationally. So just interesting timing as we're bringing this up today. It's one of the largest providers in Lebanon. And although the city is working to address this, it takes an all hands on deck approach, as we've been talking about here for the last few years. So thank you, Councillor Hill, and I just wanted to share that information, front page, Valley News. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Cam, I don't have a copy of the fiscal note, so when you get a chance, can you just get it to me? All right. Stacy Chapman, is it? Steve Chapman, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, it said no.
I don't need to speak. I was going to say the CCBA.
Wow, okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Eh,
Actually, could I have 30 seconds?
Sure.
I am Steve Chapman. I'm a practicing pediatrician in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and I read too on the front page of the Valley News and closing one of the biggest childcare facilities that many of my patients take advantage of or have been taking advantage of. And that was my worry this morning, is what will they do and how will they juggle their jobs? The 30 seconds I wanted to spend on was, we recently recruited 2 pediatricians into the practice, large recruiting. One moved from Oklahoma, the other came up from Massachusetts. One had to delay her start date because she couldn't find childcare. She wasn't a particularly fussy pediatrician. She was really looking for almost anything that would care for her kids, but she wasn't able to find something. And if she can't find something, I know that it's even more of a challenge for other of my working parents who don't earn as much as a pediatrician does. So that's my 30 seconds. Thank you for the opportunity.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. My name is Michelle Merritt. I'm the president at New Futures. For those that aren't familiar with us, we're a nonpartisan health policy and advocacy organization. We're also New Hampshire's designated Kids Count organization and have been working in the early childhood space on policy work since 2016. Over the past year, New Futures has worked with a coalition of stakeholders on this issue. And presently, New Hampshire has a vacancy rate in childcare of about 26%. The impact of this for many providers means that they have suppressed enrollment below their licensed capacity because they do not have the staff available to operate classrooms. A common experience we heard among our stakeholder group was that they have a struggle retaining their younger workforce, who often leave to take positions in public schools, and where compensation and benefits are more competitive. The data available on early childhood workforce supports this experience. As Senator Whitley highlighted, workers between the ages of 20 to 24 represent about 23% of the workforce. However, more than half of them leave the workforce in the field by the age of 25. They do this for 2 primary reasons: to take jobs with greater benefits or to raise their families. The average childcare worker in the state of New Hampshire right now, this is the median, makes about $27,000 a year. If this individual has an infant and a 4-year-old, they are spending, again, on average, $28,000 a year on childcare. You can see how this math doesn't work. So they have financially really no other alternative than to leave the workforce. For centers who have been the most successful in retaining this particular population of worker, they have offered subsidized childcare slots for their employees. Kentucky most recently took note of this strategy, again, as Senator Whitley highlighted, piloting a childcare benefit for childcare workers through their state scholarship program, which disregarded childcare worker income when determining eligibility for state scholarship. The success of this strategy in Kentucky led to them permanently codifying this program. Senate Bill 404 follows the lead of Kentucky in this area, seeking to streamline childcare eligibility for childcare workers, expanding benefits to ensure all childcare workers benefit by leveraging the state's existing scholarship program. And while we understand that the department's fiscal note, which I'm sure that you're reviewing right now, was developed on the bill as drafted, it does not contemplate a few acknowledged necessary technical changes that are needed to bring the program's design into compliance with federal requirements for CCDF. We believe that the changes, which include cascading eligibility, a streamlined application, and a temporary waiver request for the program requirements, would make this program an innovative and cost-effective solution to this challenge. I am happy to take any questions. I also have written testimony that I'm happy to hand out. But I would strongly encourage this committee to support Senate Bill 404 and work on an amendment with the department that's amenable to everyone.
Thank you, Michelle. Senator Whitley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Michelle, for your testimony. Just for Senator Bradley's information, I had mentioned that we are diligently working with the Department of Health and Human Services on some amendments to make sure we can maximize federal resources. They indicated in the fiscal note that you can't use CCDF dollars, but as I mentioned, we'll be working with them to hopefully request a waiver so we can maximize those federal dollars. And I just wanted to know if you had any additional numbers about how many folks we might be talking about here, as so many of the people in the childcare workforce already qualify under our existing income eligibility.
Yeah, so just to repeat a little bit of what was stated earlier, there's about 5,200 childcare workers in the state of New Hampshire. Of those 5,200, between 600 and 700 have kids under the age of 6. Many of those folks, given the income, would likely qualify under traditional eligibility for child care scholarship. However, there are some, like the individual that I'd mentioned that maybe has a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old who also has a spouse, and their spousal income then puts them over eligibility when it comes to income. What this program would do would capture all of those folks so that we're not in a situation in which those families that are in the position of having to pay $1,000 just for someone to work in a child care center need to make that choice. Essentially, what we were estimating is that there was under 6 is about 600 to 700. That's based on national data from the U.S. Department of Labor. When you include those over 6, so 6 to 12, that would capture before and after school programs as well as summer camp programs. The number is about the same. It's about another 600 individuals. But the cost for administering that under this program would be much less because the cost of after school care is not the same as care for an infant.
Thank you.
Yep.
It may be premature, but do you have a projection as to what it might cost with the changes that you're suggesting?
I did have a projection. I can provide it to you afterwards. I had prepared a memo. Unfortunately, I realized that I didn't bring it in my materials, but I believe my estimate was around $5 million.
Okay.
One, in the other programs that you had or that you know of, if the employee agrees to taking the scholarship and they're awarded, is there a requirement that that employee stay for a period of time, much like a bonus, employee bonus, that oftentimes you're required to stay a certain period of time?
So some of that would need to be flushed out with the department when they make the change through rulemaking, but they would then lose eligibility under traditional, they would lose eligibility for the program because they would not be a child care worker at that point. If they move between facilities, they would need to recertify and have another employment certification that they remained in child care so that their care doesn't lapse. But if they are not a child care worker anymore, they no longer would receive the benefit unless they continued to qualify based on income. So if they left the workforce but their spouse still put them under the 85% of state median income, they would still qualify, but they're just in a different sort of eligibility bucket at that point. Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Thank
you. Devin Quinn? All right. Is there anyone here that would like to speak that has not signed up? Yes. I don't see you down.
Because Dave wasn't on the top.
Oh, is there another sheet? There's a lot more people than that here.
There's a conspiracy going on here.
No, that little angel one.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So far, my 2024 is off to a great start.
You're not the only one.
For the record, my name is Dave Juve. I'm Senior Vice President for Public Policy at the Business and Industry Association. We are a statewide chamber of commerce. We have approximately 400 company members employing over 90,000 Granite Staters. I'm here in support of Senate Bill 404. Won't go over a lot of information. I thought Senator Whitley did a terrific job explaining why this is a critical employer issue. She was absolutely right. We hear from our members and other employers around the state constantly about the difficulty that they're having hiring people. And one of the issues that they consistently point to is lack of childcare options. In many ways, this is, in my mind, similar to the workforce housing issue that BIA has long been involved in. One of the ways it's similar is I don't believe there is any one silver bullet approach to correcting or improving the situation, but I do believe that there are a lot of incremental steps that will make an improvement in Senate Bill 404, I believe is one of those positive incremental steps. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Senator Whitley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for testifying today. The BIA has been at the table prioritizing childcare. They put it in their policy priority, so I just wanted to thank you for your partnership in the business community.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Devin.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Devin Quinn. I'm the Policy Director of the New Hampshire Women's Foundation. I will be quick because I know there are a lot of folks here to talk to you about this bill. But our perspective from the New Hampshire Women's Foundation is that this is a bill that is greatly going to impact the economy, families, and particularly women. Women make up a vast majority of the child care workforce who would benefit from this in a huge way. And also they are creating the slots that women, mothers will benefit from because, of course, as Senator Whitley mentioned, women are the majority and much more likely than their male or father peers to reduce or leave the workforce entirely because of childcare challenges. So women have a lot to gain, both as childcare workers and people benefiting from additional slots from this. Simply put, women make the economy work, but women need childcare. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Devin. Any questions? Seeing none. Ariel Warden. Oh, and for the record, if anyone has any testimony that they'd like to hand it off to Cam, and he'll make sure that we get it. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today, Chairman Birdsall and honorable members of the committee. My name is Errol Warden. I'm coming down here today from Coos County, representing the Coos County Child Care Director Network. And I'm here to ask you to support Senate Bill 404. And I would like to just tell you a quick story while I have your attention. A story happening right now in Lancaster, New Hampshire. A young, intelligent, and passionate professional continues her career as an early childhood teacher and director. She loves the children and being able to give the youngest members of our communities a solid start to life. She is married and has 2 children of her own. If that center didn't cover the cost of her children's care, she could no longer teach. She couldn't afford to, as the other component said in regards to her income. That center would not only lose a teacher, but the director herself due to childcare. That center currently serves 24 families within our small community. That would be 24 families left without childcare. One family actually being the director of the other childcare center, who due to lack of spots sends her children to this center. That other childcare center serves another 24 families. That is 48 families within our community. That is the entire community. Those families are the ones who run our towns. Without that one teacher, not only would the other center struggle, but the police officers from last year wouldn't have been able to go back to work. The nurses and the doctors that our clinics and hospitals so desperately need wouldn't even apply for New Hampshire positions if there are no open classrooms to care for their children. School teachers, bank tellers, librarians, and so many others are leaving the workforce for lack of childcare. That one teacher who can't afford childcare is a catalyst to a struggling workforce, which means struggling businesses and a struggling community and economy. Categorical eligibility, allowing childcare workers to afford childcare, will make a difference. The difference between full and empty classrooms, between open and closed center doors, and the difference between quality care not only for those eligible children, but for entire communities. It will allow caring and passionate childcare professionals to enter and even re-enter the workforce with their children in tow. This will enable centers to reopen their classroom doors, so in turn, businesses can reopen theirs and allow New Hampshire communities and economy to thrive. It will make a difference. It'll make a big difference. There are many steps to be taken to support childcare in New Hampshire, and that next step is today with Senate Bill 404. The next step for our children, for our businesses, and for our New Hampshire communities. I welcome you to take that step, and I thank you for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you. Megan Galvin? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairwoman and committee. My name is Megan Galvin. I am a resident of Nashua. I entered the early childhood education field at age 17, actually working after school at a local childcare center my little sister went to. Since then, I've been in the field in some capacity for the past 15 years. I've earned a bachelor's degree in child and family studies from UNH, and I have spent the vast majority of my career working specifically in centers geared towards families in poverty or trauma, with advanced training in adverse childhood experiences, mental health, and social emotional wellness. I am also the mother of a 2-year-old. And last year, I spent 56% of my weekly take-home pay just on that 2-year-old's childcare. It is a very regular conversation in my house on whether or not it is worth continuing to work on the pay that I actually bring home each week. If my pregnancy had been for twins, or if we were to have a second child, it would not make any economic sense for me to continue being in the field. And we would lose someone with 15 years of training, experience, and at this point, actually doing mentorship on younger staff members. I have several coworkers who have to limit their hours. They are offered to be full-time staff, but they have to limit their number of hours per week because they cannot afford care for their children either in the early childhood age or for after school kindergarten and up. This year, I am working at a Head Start, and during enrollment time, I met more than enough mothers who had previous early childhood education experience that they could have taken on a teacher role, but it was not economically viable for their families. I met more than enough to staff another classroom and open one up. In Nashua alone last year, Head Start had funding for us to run 11 classrooms in Head Start, combination of part-time preschool and full-time childcare. And only 6 of those 11 classrooms were open, 5 were closed due to lack of staffing. Believe that is all I have for you today. Sorry, I've never done this.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Chrissy Mendez? Chrissy Mendez? Hi.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
My name's Chrissy Mendez. I am a mother of almost 3 in a couple weeks, as well as an enrollment specialist and a staff recruiter for a network of early education centers. So I have a unique view of how childcare costs impede early educators' ability to remain in the workforce and afford tuition for their own children, which then provides childcare slots for our community. So my family, being a 2-income household, personally still struggles to afford the ever-increasing tuition rates, despite my own company offering a significant discount on my children's tuition. So for my future infant alone, when I return back to work, I will be responsible for roughly $20,000 to $25,000 per year prior to my company's discount. Every economic and financial decision my family makes is directly tied to our childcare costs, and this is the stark reality for countless families across the Granite State. In order for my company that I work for to offer competitive wages to our early educators and work to open classrooms, we had to increase tuition rates, where the burden then falls on families to absorb those costs. That includes, I am being a 2-income household, I don't qualify for any state assistance, so that would include my own tuition increasing as well. So early education and care is an essential component of our state and our nation's economic engine. And as tuition rates climb, early educators struggle to afford high quality childcare for their children and ultimately leave the workforce, as we continue to hear across the board, and propelling us into the current crisis we now face. As an enrollment specialist, I speak to families daily in desperate need of care for their child in order to return to their own jobs. But as many other providers, we simply do not have the spaces available because of closed classrooms. So SB 404 is a big step forward and an investment back into our economy. Immediate access to the maximum benefit provided by the state scholarship program would enable more educators and families like myself to afford high quality childcare for their children and enable them to remain in the workforce to keep those classrooms open and to open the closed classrooms. New Hampshire is ranked consistently as one of the top states to raise children. So doubling down on our investment in one of the foundational aspects of our economy, which is childcare, with a vote in favor of SB 404 would be a great step forward. So thank you so much for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Chrissy, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you. Who is it? Would you like to come up?
Sure. I'm Flora Lippopi at 17.
Oh, well, you were next anyway. All right.
Need my papers.
I'm sure she has a lot to say.
Wait, I can do one of my papers. Is that okay? First, go ahead.
I first want to thank you for your time. Just give me a second to kind of.
I know the feeling.
I greatly appreciate the committee and your time. First of all, I'm here as an executive director of the Child Care Center, but I'm also a mom too. I run a $3 million nonprofit child care center with currently 135 enrolled with 170 capacity. Due to changes, we'll never get back up to that licensing reg, but that's where we sit today. We also run a huge school age program of 245 kids enrolled currently. Our wait lists for infants and toddlers are rising with no insight, and the cost of care is continuing to go up. And Rochester Child Care, just like Lebanon, is barely holding on. So that really scared me. So Currently, childcare is in a market failure, says the Boston Fed. So passing the cost on to families and our current providers for any other subsidized care is nearly impossible. The lack of consistent funding is also creating deep inequality. For example, from Portsmouth to Rochester, infant care in Portsmouth is around $430 at one of the nonprofits that I sister pretty close to, where right now we're charging $300 and we're running at a deficit. So the cost of care is all over the place. At our 50% rate that we just went back up to, I've currently lost 2 staff to other child care centers who are able to subsidize the cost of the care. So now I'm trying to hire back 2 well-educated, licensed or credentialed teachers, I apologize, in order to fill back these classrooms and causing our quality to go down. Currently, the wages in our agency are between $17 and $22 an hour for our lead teachers. New Hampshire fiscal policy rates that on average the hourly worker in New Hampshire is $23 an hour. So we still are under what an hourly worker is making. So if the cost was covered, our agency would be able to continue to increase wages and to support with other benefits to help cover the cost of health insurance and retirement plans. I currently, as an executive director, make around $31 an hour. I have a family insurance plan that costs my agency $2,700 a month. I'm very fortunate right now. My board has approved to pay 80% of that rate for me. But if I, an executive director with an MBA, struggling to pay for health insurance alone, I can only imagine what my staff is feeling like between housing and all the other costs associated. I'm very fortunate. My master electrician husband makes most of the rate. So I'm very fortunate to sit here today, but not everybody has that option. So at Rochester Child Care, we have to increase our rate in February again. Our infant care is currently $300. It will go up to $330. The amount of bad debt and the need to go to civil court has increased 20% during the holiday season. Our staff are forced to see families leave care and they can't help. Our families and providers have to leave their children in subpar care, offering a scary set of problems that could be completely avoided. This is an opportunity to invest in our foundation of our economy and to stabilize the cost of care. If not, our families aren't going to be able to continue to carry the weight. So please consider SB 404 because I'm, just like Lebanon, pretty close to less than 2 years having to shut down. That's 135 slots in Rochester. And if you go to Rochester, we're one of the biggest agencies. The only other we can compare to is the YMCA, who can subsidize that cost with other services. So please consider this for our community and for our agency. Do you want to switch?
Thank you, Cora.
Hello, members
Awesome,
of the
baby.
committee. My name is Sonia Tainter, and this is Lennox, who has joined us today. I'm the Family and Community Engagement Coordinator at Rochester Child Care Center. I'm a dedicated employee to the child care field with over 10 years of experience. I started in the child care field in my hometown after-school program in Maine. During this time, I fell in love with working with the school-age children K through 5th grade and continued once I moved to the Rochester area. I'm also a mother to a 14-year-old son and this beautiful 6-month-old baby girl. My 14-year-old attended Rochester Child Care Center starting in 2013 at 4 years old and continued up until he graduated out at 5th grade right when COVID started. My 6-month-old will be starting this week. I come here today representing parents in the child care field as well as a child care provider administrator who sees the struggles our employees face every day. My concern is the cost of quality childcare. As a mother who has had children in the program during very different times, it is clear that the cost is rising. What I was paying 10 years ago versus today's cost is vastly different and a struggle for many. During the time my son attended, I was a single mother struggling to get by. I qualified for the Child Care Scholarship Program, which helped pay the cost for my son to attend. This allowed for me to work full-time as well as continue my education, which led to a master's degree I received in 2021. With the rise in livable wages, I no longer qualify for the scholarship program despite the amount I pay in bills and will have to pay out of pocket for my daughter to attend. For me, this would make a difference between paying for childcare or paying heat for my house. Currently, my daughter is only starting part-time due to the cost of the full-time care. If she were able to attend full-time, that would mean I could spend more energy on supporting Rochester Child Care Center through grant writing, family programming, as well as development of social-emotional learning curriculum. It would also allow for me to have peace of mind knowing my child is in a licensed plus facility receiving quality care.
As an admin in the field, I see how difficult it is to retain employees, with many leaving due to not being able to afford childcare or afford housing. If Senate Bill 404 was to be passed, it would make it possible for parents with children to stay working or enter the childcare profession. Many parents are looking for careers that fit the needs of their families. Childcare is it if the categorical eligibility passes. With more people working in childcare, that allows for more slots to open up for outside families. With so many children in our communities, childcare really is the basis for the workforce to hopefully stabilize after a very tumultuous few years. We can all agree many businesses have had the "we are hiring" sign up for a good portion of the last few years. This needs to be addressed. We need more childcare providers so we can care for more children, allowing for more hires. We can't hire more childcare teachers if the cost of childcare itself makes the field unaffordable. This bill will be a small step in what our community needs. Thank you for your time and hearing my story.
I think that's the fastest I've ever heard anybody.
I'm a very fast talker.
Yeah. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jackie Cowell? Okay. Brian Clark and Jesse Davis, DHHS? Hi. Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Brian Clark with the Department of Health and Human Services.
And I'm Jessie Davis. I'm the Bureau Chief of Child Development at DHHS.
Welcome.
So we're eager to be working with the prime sponsor, Senator Whitley, on an amendment to better utilize federal dollars, and we're available for any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Senator
You
Bradley.
knew it was coming.
Yeah.
So do you think that with the changes that you're gonna make with Senator Whitley, you're gonna be able to get it down into that $5 million or less range of the general fund expenditure?
We're working on figuring out what it will cost, but dramatically less.
I like that word. Thank you.
We put that in quotes.
It's in the record. Senator Whitley, did you have a question? I don't, thank you. Okay.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. For the record, my name is Henry Vayu, and I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire YMCAs. The YMCAs across the state collectively are one of the largest child care providers in the state. In addition to representing the YMCAs here as a lobbyist, I also serve on the board of the Granite YMCA, which is Concord, Manchester, Goffstown, Londonderry. We're on the seacoast. And last year, we as a board made a decision to really invest in childcare. The demand is really great. And we decided to increase the starting wage for our childcare workers. We weren't also able to then increase the rates that we charge parents because we're trying to help that population. So it was basically a shifting of priorities in our budget. We do have some profitable areas of our operation, and therefore we're able to do that. But that in and of itself is not going to solve the problem. This would be an additional tool in the toolbox to get workers. There's plenty of demand, but a lot of the childcare workers just can't find the workforce. And so this would help in that regard. And so we support the bill.
Any questions from the committee? I do have one. You heard the testimony from before. Did the YMCAs, do they have the capability on some of the other services you provide to subsidize the childcare aspect?
Yeah, I mean, we provide a lot of services for the community. Some of our summer camp programs are profitable. Our exercise programs, we have different areas of programs that we provide that are profitable. And so in the instance that I mentioned, the Granite Y, we decided to increase the wages. We were able to do that. I think, as was mentioned, organizations that are just providing childcare don't have that luxury. And so it's a little more difficult for them, but we were in a position where we were able to do that. We want to become the place where childcares want to work. We want to become the premier childcare, serving organization in the state. And to do that, you got to make an investment. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Henry. Is there anyone here that would like to speak that hasn't been given the opportunity? I know there are, come on down. There are a few people here who have signed up but didn't say yay or nay on speaking.
Thank you for having me.
Mhm.
My name is Anthony Panciocco. I am the Director of Child Care Services at the Southern District YMCA. I'm the father of a 2-year-old, and I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 404. I appreciate your time. Like most child care programs, we've struggled to hire staff over the last few years. Aside from pay, the leading reason why candidates will turn down a position is an inability to pay for child care for their own children, largely younger children, is what we see, which is a pretty cruel irony in our child care business. The most significant example of this came about a year ago. We had 2 candidates with education experience. They were interested in reopening a before and after school program that had been closed due to staffing shortages since before COVID. They interviewed well. They were all ready to open that program, but unfortunately they had to decline their offers. They declined because they had young children that they could not afford to pay for childcare. It was more economical for them to not work than for them to work. So they wanted to give back to their community. They wanted to fill a position that would have impacted dozens of families in the community that they live in. But that system that they were looking to invest in made it impossible. Altogether, we have 2 sites, including that site, that remain closed to this day because of staffing shortages, and 40% of our programs currently have a wait list. This is just one example of a fundamental problem in childcare, which gets more complex as staff move through different phases of their lives. A staff member just out of college may not be struggling to pay for childcare, but that same staff member may have a difficult decision just a few years later as they look to start a family. Young families working in our fields face that choice: stay in the field that they love and make a difference in, or seek out other opportunities to ensure they can afford to pay for childcare as their family dynamics change. That example doesn't come from a particular member of my team, though it could apply to a few. It's not an abstract example in support of SB 404. It's an example from my life, a father of a 2-year-old, and a childcare director who's doubling as a site director, so we don't have to close a 3rd program every morning and afternoon. These conversations about this issue range from our boardroom every day to figure out how we can support our families and our staff, to my office with those staff members that are struggling to pay for their own childcare, and also to my living room, where my wife and I frequently discuss what it would look like financially for us to take on a second childcare tuition. What it comes down to is significantly more than a second mortgage for us. So if we're struggling, and we likely will continue to be struggling even more so, it's critical that we make an investment in these staff members that need it. So while it's getting more and more difficult for our childcare staff to both have families and work in childcare, they certainly should not have to choose, and SB 404 would go a long, long way into making sure that they don't have to. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you having me here today.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you. Again, is there anyone here who hasn't been able to testify but would like to on Senate Bill 404? With that, I'm going to close the hearing on 404, and let Cam get himself situated, and we'll start 411 shortly.
Isn't that ironic?
And I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 411, an act relative to emergency mental health services for persons 21 years of age and younger, and Senator Whitley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Once again, for the record, my name is Becky Whitley, and I'm honored to serve New Hampshire Senate District 15, which includes the wonderful communities of Bow, Concord, Pennacook, and Hopkinton. Today, I'm honored to introduce Senate Bill 411, which takes yet another step in addressing New Hampshire's children's mental health crisis. This is also a very personal bill for me professionally. Before I was in the Senate, this is what I spent my career on, supporting children in a mental health crisis and making sure that we set up a system where they don't have to get into a crisis. This is something that has been a bipartisan effort. Senator Bradley and many others have worked on the children's mental health system for years to get it where it is today on the public side. Despite significant public investment from the New Hampshire legislature to ensure children do have access to timely mental health treatment, it's really time we address the other side of the ledger and ensure that all children, including children with private insurance, have access to the care they so desperately need. Unfortunately, as we all know, we continue to see significant impacts of the pandemic in the rising mental health needs among children and youth. I, like probably many of you, have received calls from constituents, parents who have children waiting in the ER, parents who are desperate to get their children the care that they so desperately need. I am ready to stop fielding those calls and make sure that these kids just get what they need. You may have seen that in mid-December, 18 children were boarded in emergency room departments. That's an acute psychiatric crisis waiting for care. I would argue that even one child awaiting services is in an ER shows that we could be doing so much more. 18 children is truly unacceptable. This is thankful to the legislature. The system we have to support Medicaid eligible children right now is quite robust. Yet now we're seeing an increasing amount of children with private insurance going into the Medicaid system because of coverage gaps by their carriers. This bill was introduced to address these gaps and hopefully reduce the financial pressure on the Medicaid system. To illustrate the pressure we're now seeing on the Medicaid system, it's worth noting that the intake and determination data from the Fast Forward program, that is the Medicaid program for children with very significant mental health needs. Between January 2020 and October 2023, we saw 20% of the children referred to Fast Forward are privately insured. 20%. Of those 20%, another 80% were ultimately found eligible for Medicaid through what was formerly called the Katie Beckett, based on the acuity of their needs. That didn't have to be the case. We shouldn't have seen those kids being pushed into the Medicaid system. These numbers reinforce two important consumer experiences. One, that unfortunately we are not seeing the robust array of mental health services being covered by our private carriers, and that the services that are being offered aren't meeting the needs of children, leading those children to develop even more severe mental illness, which requires this high level of care, like inpatient hospitalization or the Fast Forward program. I'll note too that in addition to the Fast Forward program, which is that Medicaid program, privately insured children are also able to access functional supports from our community mental health system, which is also paid for by public dollars. The total expense to the state for covering these services to otherwise privately insured children exceeded $2 million in the last biennium. When I say that the public investment in this population is significant, I am not being hyperbolic. I want to thank all the stakeholders who have taken part in a very earnest effort over the last 3 years to address this. Yet, unfortunately, it has not yielded the full results required to adequately address the needs of New Hampshire's most vulnerable children. I think if private carriers provided adequate coverage, a sufficient provider network, a robust array of services, these higher levels of care could be avoided. It's necessary that we revisit this legislative policy solution. You saw this many years ago when Senator Tom Sherman introduced SB 70. In lieu of continuing to subsidize the care of privately insured children, the state should make sure that our carriers come to the table and provide the necessary care to our youngest members. I'm happy to take any questions. I will defer technical questions to the folks behind me. If you will indulge me, the Honorable Senator Tom Sherman was intended to come today to provide testimony. He has worked on this issue for years. He unfortunately is very sick and so has asked me to read his testimony, if you'll indulge me. So this is from Senator Tom Sherman. Good afternoon, Senator Birdsell and members of the committee. I am Dr. Tom Sherman of Rye, a former member of the Senate, a retired gastroenterologist, and a current board member of the Seacoast Mental Health Center. I appreciate you hearing my testimony on what I consider to be a critically important bill, and thank you to Senators Whitley, Bradley, Prentice, and others for bringing it forward. As a physician on call one Saturday in the fall of 2021, I stopped by to visit a 10-year-old girl who was boarding in our emergency room after she told her parents she wanted to kill herself. There were no inpatient psychiatric beds available at Hampstead Hospital, so she was on day 10 of her ER stay. She was in an otherwise empty white room with only her parents visiting. Friends, teachers, and other family were not allowed. Amazingly, she had private insurance, and her parents had yet to hear from her carrier. As I got up to leave, she looked directly at me and asked me to do everything I could to make sure that no more kids would have to suffer like she had. No child brave enough to ask for help should have to wait 10 days in the emergency room for appropriate care. So as a state senator in 2022, I introduced Senate Bill 70. In my testimony then, I cited the numbers of 30 to 35 children in New Hampshire hospital emergency rooms waiting for care, and sadly, the same is true in 2024. Significant numbers of Granite State children grappling with acute mental health crises are still waiting in our hospital emergency rooms for days on end. You have SB 411 before you today because SB 70 was first re-referred in the Senate and then died on the table. The primary reason SB 70 did not proceed through the process was that commercial carriers pledged to work outside the legislative process with legislators, providers, the Department of Insurance, and other interested parties on a non-legislative solution. We agreed to go that route because we believe that a non-legislative solution might provide quicker and better results for the patients already in crisis and for those looking for urgently needed treatment in order to avoid escalation of their mental illness. Unfortunately, 3 years later, we have not seen enough progress. The outcome was not achieved, and our children in mental health crises continue to be boarded in our hospital emergency rooms. SB 70 ensured coverage for best practice treatment of mental illness in pediatric patients in 2021. The irony now is the same as it was then. Those services fully covered by New Hampshire Medicaid were and are generally not covered in the same way by the carriers. Like SB 70, SB 11 will level the playing field for children covered by commercial carriers, but with some important updates to the 2021 version. As I emphasized in 2021 on SB 70, this legislation ensures equal access to best practice mental health care for Granite State children who are escalating towards or already in crisis. It represents a critical step in supporting urgently needed mental health treatment for our children and youth. I urge you to act favorably on SB 411, and he is happy to answer any questions from Dr. Tom Sherman. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the committee's consideration of 411.
I do have a question. When in your testimony, when you said you appreciate all the stakeholders, who were the stakeholders that you brought in on this bill?
So when SB 70 was passed, there was a working group formed with advocates, community mental health centers, carriers, the Department of Insurance, many others are probably in this room. Yeah.
And what carriers did you work with?
I can let others speak to that. I believe all the carriers were at the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none.
So
Thank you.
My last request, I have a constituent here who needs to get to an appointment. I would ask
That
they-
is Tim and Declan? Yep.
Thank
I
you.
was gonna call him next. Tim and Declan, come on down. Welcome.
Thank you, Senators. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Declan Warwick, and I am a resident of Bedford, New Hampshire. I'm here to speak in support of SB 411. I'm a college freshman at the University of Southern Maine, a brain cancer survivor, a hard of hearing person, and dozens of other things, all of which I am very proud of. Out of every possible title or description I could apply to myself, the one I am most proud of is calling myself brother. I am here today because right now my 12-year-old sister is suffering from a mental illness and is at Hampstead Hospital. It did not have to be this way and should not have to be this way for any family. She has been struggling for years. Her last school year was particularly tough. She was begging for help that her family simply could not find. I've watched my parents struggle to find her the support she needs while her condition steadily got worse. My sister has now been hospitalized twice. We've had police and mobile crisis at our home several times. It has been hard to watch because it makes me and my parents feel hopeless and upset. Instead of focusing on my studies at college during my first semester of freshman year, I spent a lot of time preoccupied and worried about what was happening at home. Her condition was so challenging at Thanksgiving that I wondered if I should stay at school rather than come home. Last week we spent Christmas Day not together with family and loved ones in our house, but opening gifts in a hospital meeting room. I support SB 411 because the services the bill calls for are the services my sister has needed for a long time but couldn't get. I'm thankful for the staff at Fast Forward for the support they've given to my sister and parents over the past few months, but unfortunately, it is not enough. And too often, the kinds of services people tell us my sister needs either don't exist or have a long wait list, when very often they are needed in a large emergency. I need my sister back. I need her to feel like herself again. I need my parents to feel supported and safe. I need to be able to focus on my studies and be the big brother I want to be without worrying that every phone call from home will be bad news. SB 411 would help so many families like mine to be sure that the kids can get the help they need it when they need it. As a pediatric cancer survivor, I've seen firsthand how fast access to high quality care with insurance coverage to support it can make a difference. I would not be here today if the cancer treatment system operated like the mental health system currently does, especially considering that what she is going through makes my cancer and its after effects look very easy. It is time that my sister and all others like her got the same quality care, compassion, services, and insurance coverage, just like anyone else facing a life-threatening health issue. I hope you will join me and my family in supporting SB 411 for kids like my sister who deserve a chance at health and healing. Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Tim Rourke. I'm Declan's father and Exilia's father, a resident of Bedford, New Hampshire. I've spoken in committees a number of times in my professional career. I'm the former director of substance use grant making at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, and I spent about 8 years serving as the chairman of the state's Commission on Addiction. And in those roles was also one of the co-founders of the Children's Behavioral Health Collaborative, working quite closely with Senator Whitley and her colleagues back in the day. Never in a million years thought I would come before you not with a professional hat on. However, I do want to, while deferring to my son's eloquent explanation of what our lives have been like for the last 6 months, I do want to just layer on a little bit of systemic context as to why this bill is so critical. Currently, I'm a healthcare consultant with a national consulting firm. I work with states, advocacy organizations, payers, providers, and systems solution thinkers, both in the behavioral health and digital health arena. We are privately insured. And I want to be very clear that our insurance provider has been a good partner to us as we've navigated the system as it is. But the problem that we have is that, as the senator spoke to, my daughter is currently awaiting her determination around Medicaid, which doesn't make sense to us because I am privately insured. I will also tell you that I just started a brand new premium year. Our insurance is purchased on the private market, and my insurance premium actually dropped. I'm not sure why, given the economics of our state's healthcare system and our nation's healthcare system, but I would happily pay more if I understood that the commercial market was doing everything it can to maximize access to behavioral health services at parity as they are supposed to with other chronic life-threatening health conditions. I want to share with you one very specific story that speaks to the challenge of a privately insured family in this context. In October, my daughter had what we thought was a first episode psychosis or potentially caused by a seizure. She was brought inpatient to the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon, and it was quickly determined that actually what had happened is she had had an adverse reaction to a behavioral health medication. She had had a number of allergic reactions to medications, and so the clinically indicated strategy to address that would be something called a medication wash. This is typically done in an inpatient setting where the patient is weaned off of their medications so that there can be a determination as to what the side effects might have been causing, what the medications may have been doing wrong, and then to begin to rebuild a medication plan that has less dangerous side effects and more likelihood of success. As I said, that's very often done in an inpatient setting. When we were at Dartmouth, we were told Dartmouth does not provide that kind of service to pediatrics because they have no pediatric inpatient psychiatric capacity. We were then waitlisted anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks. And in the one instance where there was an acute unit that was willing to do it that had an 8-week wait list, they were going to be unable to even tell us if she qualified for the bed until we hit that 8-week and got to the top of the list. Our family was forced to make a determination to bring her home. While we engaged and enrolled very quickly and fast forward, my daughter undertook a medication wash at home. We handled it as best as we could until we couldn't. And for that, she's been at Hampstead for a week and a half. I want to be really clear. I don't blame Dartmouth for not providing that service. Dartmouth can't provide that service because the economics don't work. It is not the state's responsibility to singularly build every solution for children in crisis for behavioral health. In order to develop the right economic environment for providers, many of whom I know are here today, we have to make sure that the commercial market follows the leadership of Medicaid and the public financing sector and ensures that an array of these types of emergency services are adequately available. One good insurer providing it is simply not enough to make the economics work where facilities like Dartmouth or others could develop in-state acute inpatient units to do that kind of work rather than forcing a child into Hampstead. So I strongly support this bill. I encourage you to support it. I think it not only makes good sense in advancing our children's behavioral health strategies in the state of New Hampshire, it makes good economic sense, it makes good programmatic sense, and it prevents the nightmare that my daughter is currently living under. Thank you very much, and Declan and I are happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Steve Chapman. It's on.
So I'm Steve Chapman. I am a general pediatrician. I practice in Lebanon, New Hampshire at Dartmouth. the system that you just heard about from Declan and from Tim. And I did not know Declan, I did not know their story until today. And I did not know that I would be following them. I can tell you that the story that they told is not unique. Not a week goes by without, in my outpatient general pediatric clinic, that I see a family that has had significant family changing struggles because of something that their kids are going through. We know the numbers have gone up nationally and in New Hampshire for depression, anxiety, and suicidality of kids. And we know that's an issue for New Hampshire kids. I see that in my clinic every week, as do my colleagues. I want to tell you a story of a recent 14-year-old boy that I have known for years. A great kid, great family. He plays basketball. He's had his issues on and off, but he is a really tough, resilient, funny kid. Recently, he started to have some struggles at school, some issues, as he's had in the past. But this was worse, as it turned out, than it had been previously. His family looked for counselors, looked for help, talked to the school, and weren't able to find anything, but they thought that it would, the ship would right itself as it had in the past. He had a suicide attempt. He took pills and he took a knife to his wrists, and he ended up in the emergency room in Lebanon, the same one you just heard about. And he was evaluated and deemed not to be an immediate risk, and he was sent home with the instruction to get into counseling, to get into care, and to get into support. This is a privately insured family, and they weren't able to find anything. They called, they got lists from their insurers about in-network providers, and they weren't able to find anything. He didn't want to go back to school. He was afraid of being bullied or teased. His parents didn't feel comfortable sending him back to school because they didn't know what would happen. They also didn't feel comfortable leaving him at home because they were afraid of what might happen. And so one of the parents took a leave from her job to stay home. I didn't know any of this until about a month and a half, almost 2 months later, when they came in to see me for a checkup. And I was asked, "How are you doing? What's been happening since I saw you last?" And I got this story. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to sit with a family and hear that that's what's just happened to them. And I do what I can. I represent the 300 pediatricians in the state of New Hampshire through the New Hampshire Pediatric Society. And we do what we can. And so I did an evaluation for depression and anxiety, and I started him on medication, and I talked about counselors and who might you be able to call. And I said, "Come back and see me. I'll do what I can." But what I find myself in those conversations telling families is that I'm sorry, I wish there were more I could offer you. I wish there was more available for you that I could do for you. That's what I have to say when I'm in that room with that family. That is not what I have to say when I'm in this room with you, because there is more that we can do, and that's this bill. So on behalf of New Hampshire's pediatricians, we need your help. We'll continue to do everything we can with kids in our clinics and kids that we take care of. But we need more systems for kids and for families on Medicaid or in private insurers to take advantage of supports before kids get into crisis, before they end up in the emergency room, while the first signs are starting to present. It's incredibly expensive to wait, and it's incredibly destructive for families to have to go through what this family went through. So I will stop with that. Thank you for the opportunity to share that story, and I welcome any questions.
Senator Avard.
Thank you. In this bill, thank you for your testimony. It says that these services may include therapeutic milieu, what is that?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Therapeutic milieu?
Milieu?
Milieu, there you go.
Yeah, so that that gets to the team-based approach that kids generally need. There's no silver bullet to the mental health crisis for kids, and this bill isn't a silver bullet either. It's the teamwork that that we try to provide from my outpatient clinic with teachers, with parents, with counselor, with a basketball coach. It's that team environment or milieu around the kid that is most important.
And one follow-up. And in this bill, I don't see where it says that it provides for medication wash. Would this bill provide for that as well? In the previous testimony, they said they went to Dartmouth and that wasn't something that they could do for you.
So my understanding, I'm a general pediatrician. I'm not a psychiatrist, and I would not oversee a medical wash. My understanding is that's something that's generally done in an inpatient observed setting. For some medications, for SSRIs that I use to treat depression, I can safely wean kids off of certain medications on an outpatient basis. But in the presence of acute psychosis or potential self-harm, that's best done in an inpatient observed environment.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question, and just sort of building off what Senator Avard said. You know, we already have sort of that coverage for acute psychiatric hospitalization. I think these are those other services. So I'm wondering if the WASH would be covered, you know, in any sort of in letter. Yeah, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but letter B is behavioral health crisis intervention. You know, be that mobile or crisis stabilization, which could be short-term intensive. There's residential treatment in here, which is that stabilization. So there are things that it could be covered under. Would you agree?
Yes, yes. I mean,
Partial hospitalization programs, letter I. Any other question? Would you agree?
I would agree. I
Okay.
would agree.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. It's, you know, my reading of the bill and how it interfaces with what I understand is what I'm hoping for from a medical perspective is a highly supportive, intensively structured outpatient experience and environment that keeps kids out of emergency rooms, out of hospitals, that keeps families intact, that really tries to minimize the disruption that can happen to multiple systems, but most importantly to kids and their families. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators, members of the committee. My name is DJ Betancourt, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Insurance Department. I am joined today by my colleague, Alex Feldavel. His unofficial title in the department is the Jack of all trades. I believe that this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to appear before you since I have officially become Commissioner, and I feel very fortunate that my maiden voyage is to discuss improving our mental health system for children. As you know, mental health has and continues to be one of my top priorities as Commissioner, and it has been a focus, a major focus of the department for many years. In fact, as some of you may know, certainly Senator Whitley does, I recently reestablished the department's Behavioral Health Advisory Committee to help us better understand what we can do to improve the state's mental health system as it pertains to commercial insurance. In particular, we appreciate the challenges facing children's mental health. I think that you have heard some of that already in the testimony this afternoon. It remains a pressing and evolving issue that demands our attention. We know that children continue to struggle with long-established challenges to their mental health, as well as the residual impacts from the pandemic and new and emerging issues such as new technologies and social media impacts. Fortunately, this state, those of you here at the table and elsewhere, have done great work to, over the past several years, to destigmatize mental health struggles, as well as Senator Whitley mentioned, provide considerable state resources. That is a great credit to the policymakers here in New Hampshire over the past several years. The department has obviously dug into this as well. The department has a long history of engaging on this issue. And I will say that, at least in my experience, we have always found cooperative health insurance carriers to assist us in advancing that work. But as we know, there is always more work to do, which brings us to Senate Bill 411. While the department's official position is to be neutral, we very much appreciate and support what this legislation is seeking to advance. Parents need the ability to access the care that their children need, and we need providers willing and able to provide that care. Beyond that, all of us serving in state government have a responsibility to ensure that state resources are not being overused when that should be the responsibility borne by another entity. There are two issues that I would raise to your attention for consideration. First, I've recently, in the past, participated in a few different discussions with Senator Whitley and a group of state officials and stakeholders. And my fundamental takeaway from those discussions is that to be successful in this effort, we must first identify the precise services that we are trying to address, and then match those services with the appropriate CPT codes. Because the feedback that I am getting from industry is that many of the services that we are discussing today are currently covered. Where the trouble is coming in is matching those services to the particular CPT code so that the provider can bill for those services. That is a tedious but critical task, and that work is not easily accomplished by attempting to enshrine it in statute. The other challenge that you may encounter is that as services evolve and advance over time, you may find yourselves having to continually go back to the statute to update it. Now, that might more appropriately work in rulemaking, where departments are required to update those rules every few years. But as you know, the legislative process in some cases can take 6 months to a year. And that leads to my second consideration. When it comes to improving our mental health system, as the saying goes, I have a need for speed. That drives my philosophy, and it is my motivation when it comes to this issue. Therefore, I would suggest, for consideration, holding the legislation until crossover. Hang on to the legislation while the department convenes a meeting with insurance carriers and stakeholders, perhaps even before our advisory committee. Now, I understand that that process was cited before, and some felt that the outcome there was lacking. What I would say is I think we've got a great team in place. And I think that we have advanced in our understanding, in our experience, since the Senate Bill 70 exercise. Senator Prentice, I think, knows the philosophy that I take to bringing stakeholders together. I think that could bear some fruit. I think that that will also allow us to drill into the details of these services, ensure that those services are appropriate under commercial insurance, and then, as I said, play matchmaker between the service and the CPT code. This will allow providers to immediately better understand how to bill for those services. Because as I said, what is upsetting to me is that some of the services that I am hearing are currently covered, but there is confusion over how to bill them. That bothers me because that can very practically and very easily be fixed, in my opinion. Further, it allows the department to potentially recreate the successful process that we used last year, in which we addressed a different but similar type situation, whereby we issued a department bulletin that allowed for clear guidance on which services should be billed to a particular CPT code. Here again, that bulletin process can take a month or two, as opposed to the legislative process, which obviously takes longer. And the bulletin would be a significantly different approach than the Senate Bill 70 approach, because the bulletin ensures that all of the carriers understand what is expected, they understand what the lay of the land is, and they understand that they will be held accountable to that resolution. And so therefore, by holding the legislation in abeyance, it keeps the process accountable, while also ensuring that if during the course of this process, we as the stakeholder group discover that we do in fact need to adjust state statute, we have the vehicle at hand ready to go to do that. So those are my thoughts for your consideration. As always, my department stands ready to assist the legislature on this and any other issues. Happy to answer any questions, unless Alex, you'd like to add anything.
Well, just briefly, there are a couple areas where we really think it would be helpful for a working group to have further discussion. One of them is just the whole issue of when you read the language in the bill about the coverage that's required. It sounds a lot like description of a public program, and includes reference to services like advocacy for the family and things like that. And that's different from health insurance coverage language. And so it creates a question of, well, what services are we really talking about really? And that's why the commissioner was referring to this idea of bringing it down to the service code level so we know what we're talking about. And then another question that I think needs more attention in thinking about this bill is whether the solution is mandating the coverage or doing something to try to address the shortage of providers and the issue of network development. So, open questions.
Thank you. Any question, Senator Prentice?
Great. Thank you, Senator Wurtzel. Thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you again. So I want to go over the mechanics of this. You were talking about precise services, drilling it down, matching the CPT code. So what I'm hearing is that the healthcare provider is doesn't either have, it's not doing the proper coding or doesn't have the information that they need, and they send it forward to whoever is providing coverage for that particular patient, and it gets rejected. And you think that there's a remediation that can take place that'll resolve that?
Yeah, I think that there's an education process that can go forward for the stakeholders and the providers to say, this is the type of service that we want to offer. These are the types of services that we offer. And then have the carriers respond, we cover those services. You should look at the following CPT codes, whatever those codes may be. And so now you've cleared up the misunderstanding there between what the service is and how to properly bill for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your collaboration. The department has been nothing but a very strong partner at the table as we try to figure this out. I think what the commissioner is describing in terms of matching CPT codes is exactly what we tried to do, Commissioner, 3 years ago, and it didn't result in every carrier to the table. Some were to the table, not everyone was to the table. Some do it, others don't. And so I just would like to know, it's, sometimes it's in the provider contract, sometimes it's not in the provider. So we've been here before, Commissioner. And so I am very interested in continuing to this work together, but I would ask if you're willing to, push a little harder on that issue, because we have been to this table before about CPT codes, and it wasn't fruitful.
Sure. So I would reference back to what I mentioned before about the potential bulletin avenue, because that ensures, as I said, that everybody is on the same page, and that's across all carriers. To your point, Senator, I won't mention names here, but I do know that it is the opinion of the stakeholders and the providers that some carriers are doing better at this than others. What the bulletin will do is ensure that everybody understands the expectations, and that's what they'll be held accountable to.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I heard you correctly, you're advising us maybe to hold off a little bit until crossover, if I understood correctly, and we can move forward, which should be a quicker process than the legislative process.
Sure. What I would commit to you, again, for your consideration, is to give us a deadline. Don't obviously put yourself right up against crossover. but give us a deadline. And by that deadline, I will commit to you that my team and I will appear before you. We will update you on the progress that we have made. We will make a recommendation as to whether or not we think the education approach in and of itself is going to accomplish the mission, whether the bulletin approach is going to accomplish the mission, or if there are reforms to the statute that need to be made. But I think that in the course of the next couple of months, we can bring those stakeholders together. And as I said, hopefully recreate the model that my team underwent last year when we were dealing with primary behavioral care over in the House.
I was just going to say the deadline for our committee to act on fiscal bills, which this is March 28th.
I think Senator Brown is going to address that.
Not to quote an American icon, Yogi Berra, but this is deja vu all over again. So, DJ, sorry for the informality.
Quite all right. We've known each other a long time.
Yeah, we have. New blood with you as commissioner. I think the bulletin may well be a way of getting it done, but you're gonna have to crack the whip. We heard the same testimony 2 years ago. The fiscal note is probably almost identical. You know, that the department assumes that services listed in the bill are already covered services under the benchmark plan. So we're hearing that again today. Then there is the possibility further in the fiscal note of new mandated benefits, but the testimony that you've given is that there aren't any new mandated benefits. I don't think. It's just a question of matching the codes, which should be relatively easy to do. The
Yeah, I think that
deadline-
is true in a majority of cases, yes.
Okay.
I
The
don't wanna make a
deadline
blanket statement.
is really February 20th.
Okay.
So that we can take action before it goes to, actually maybe that first week in March, so that it can go to finance, which I'm assuming Senator Gray will want to do it. So I won't quote Yogi Berra again to the carriers, but you've heard me.
I will certainly crack the whip, Senator, but I
Crack
think
the
many of
whip.
them are here and
Oh, yeah, they're all
they've
here.
heard your message as well.
I'm not sure, but
I would suggest that we think about the week we come back from break.
yeah, I think that's the deadline for bills to get out.
This is a discussion we can have off.
Yeah, we'll get back to
You
you.
let
I
me know
think
and
that
we'll be
we
here.
will have
We
to
will.
take action by March 6th.
Cam, are you going to correct all of us?
So mine, sorry. I'm fairly certain the deadline for the bill to be voted on in HHS is March 28th.
That's what I thought too.
Right, so that's the deadline to act on Senate bills with a fiscal impact. The deadline for us to act on regular bills is April 4th. March 28th is also my birthday.
Oh,
How he knows.
happy birthday to you.
Let's say March 6th, so that this bill will have time to go to finance.
Got it.
Okay. No more questions for the commission.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you all. Nice to see you. Happy New Year.
Andrew Hosmer. Andrew Hosmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy New Year to the committee. It's nice to be before you. For the record, Andrew Hosmer on behalf of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. My client has requested to sign in opposed at this point, and certainly not because we oppose the legislative intent of this. We do not. But we feel that consistent with the commissioner's remarks, that some work can be done here to make this bill better and make sure there is a level playing field of understanding between the department, the carriers, and the providers, certainly. So we support the legislative intent. It's our highest priority to make sure that our covered members get the appropriate care at the appropriate place at the appropriate time. And certainly it's to hear the stories of ED boarding are very disconcerting, and certainly something that we look to continue a strong partnership with all stakeholders in reducing the number of people, particularly our adolescents and our children in ED boarding. And we are very much in support of the stakeholder process the insurance department has recommended, and we look forward to working with the stakeholders between now and the first part of March and finding some resolution. With that, I'm happy to take questions, but I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Whitley?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Is it your client's position that they already cover these services in the bill?
Thank you for the question, Senator Whitley. There are a number of services here that are covered. And prior to SB 85, Harvard Pilgrim covered a number of those services that were mentioned in SB 85 already before the legislation was signed into law. So yes, and we do cover a wide array of services here, and we think there might be some disconnect between the services currently covered and perhaps some of the codes that can be addressed with a bulletin.
So, my question to everyone is, if you say it's already covered, then, I don't understand the opposition to spelling it out. If your client says that these services are already covered, then, making sure that constituents and other residents of New Hampshire know what's actually covered by having it in statute. I don't see why you would oppose it if you're saying it's already covered.
Again, thank you for the question. I think it's not necessarily that we oppose that. We just think there might be a better way to handle it. That's all. That might be a little more nimble, as certainly this area of medicine is certainly changes quite a bit over the years. So if there's a more nimble fashion to cover services that are appropriate for individuals, that may be a better way to handle it. And certainly adding some definition to some of the terms in the latter half of the bill, I think would be, I know Harvard Pilgrim would be very receptive to that as well. So there's some things there that just need a little more clarity for their comfort, if possible.
Last follow-up? And I just, want to be clear that we, in response to, issues raised through SB 70, we actually did define them further. So it was the carriers who asked for further definition, and that's what we have in 411.
Thank you very much, Senator Whitley.
Thank you, Senator Birdsall. Good to see you, Senator.
Nice to see you as well.
I think what I'm hearing, this might be more of a drill down issue, and I started with the commissioner, so I'll bring this back to you, is that you provide, we're hearing that these services are provided, but the coding is not done in an appropriate way. So ultimately the bill comes in for reimbursement and it gets rejected, even though these services are covered, they're just not properly coded. And do the people, I'm just trying to make that connection there, because it does seem like a mismatch. And if you already do it, but I'm not trying to give you a hard time, I'm just trying to think through this. If you already cover this, then is the bulletin enough? I mean, how do we get there?
Thank you for the question, Senator Prentice. It's probably going a little deeper than I'm able to at my level, but certainly I understand your question, and certainly it's a salient point for discussion when we have stakeholder meetings over the next couple of weeks, and I think that needs clarity as well, and identifying where the bottleneck is and what the obstacles are, and certainly in good faith, Harvard Pilgrim will participate and try and find some solutions to these.
Great, thank you very much. I wasn't trying.
Okay.
I know it's a drill down, but I'm trying to think through these steps along the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would just remind everyone, we have 3 more bills we have to get to today, so. Huh? 3. Yes, including yours, by the way.
I know.
Senator Ricciardi, did you want to speak on this? Oh, okay. Emma Savigny? Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman and committee, for hearing my testimony. My name is Emma Savini. I'm the Children's Behavioral Health Policy Coordinator at New Futures. New Futures is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that advocates, educates, and collaborates for the health and wellness of all Granite Staters. We are here in strong support of Senate Bill 411, and we were one of the stakeholders that sat at that table since 2020, trying to come to a solution to this problem. We feel that Senate Bill 411 is the next logical step in solving this issue and reducing the emergency room boarding crisis and ensuring that children are getting the supports they need in their communities, and ensuring that our state dollars that are put into the system of care are maximized to their full potential to strengthen the system of care for all Granite State children. As you've heard, there is a discrepancy between providers and carriers on what the billing code definitions are, and we've had that discussion many times over. There are ships passing in the night. So while we appreciate the opportunity to further have those discussions, I really do feel Senate Bill 411 is a necessary next step to ensure that everybody is on the same page and we can continue to work towards coverage for all children, regardless of carriers. Further, these services are on their face, resulting in better outcomes for kids. When kids are treated in their communities as the services that are listed in 411 are community-based services, many of them, children are less disrupted in school, in their social lives, and with families, and that results in better outcomes for kids and results in them having to less likely to have more severe acute psychosis later on and needing those higher level services such as Fast Forward. So not only is it better for the child, it's better for the carrier. They don't have to pay for those more expensive services down the line. For those reasons, New Futures urges the committee to vote to pass on 411.
Hi, Michelle Merritt. I'm the president at New Futures. I'm here for some historical purposes because I was part of the conversations originally around SB 70. There were a lot of questions as well around CPT code matching, and Emma hit the nail on the head that this has been a lot of ships passing in the night. We have heard time and time again from carriers, we cover these services, but when we actually drill down to what the services are that we are looking to be covered, it is not uniform among the carriers that they cover them. Many of them, or a few of them, they are covering more than they have covered before, but it is not a uniform experience. The other thing that I'll note is that it is very complicated when you're talking about CPT codes, because some of those CPT codes are not in the provider contracts. So you might go to a community mental health center and they might want to potentially bill for a service that we've listed in this bill, but it's not in their contract. So they would never get paid for it. Though that is one of the central issues that we are trying to resolve with this bill. That said, New Futures does appreciate the testimony of the department. We feel very encouraged by that conversation and the practicality of the deadlines before us. We are open to continuing this conversation and also appreciate the whip being cracked, so to speak, to earnestly bring every single one of the stakeholders and carriers to the table to appropriately address this issue. It has gone on far too long. We need to address this. The time is now. No more. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Holly Stevens? The next one up is going to be Devin Quinn.
Fooled by the second page again.
Fool me once.
I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Holly Stevens. I'm the Director of Public Policy for NAMI New Hampshire. And I do want to start off by apologizing if I repeat anything because I couldn't hear anything that was going on in this room. NAMI New Hampshire is a nonprofit grassroots organization whose mission is to improve the lives of all people impacted by mental illness and suicide through support, education, and advocacy. On behalf of NAMI New Hampshire, I am here today to speak in support of Senate Bill 411. as everybody in this room knows, the youth continue to struggle in our state with mental health. So I won't get into any of that with you. I know that you guys are very well aware of that. I did want to mention, I'm sure you've heard today about the high fidelity wraparound services that are a part of this bill. That is one area that's of particular importance to NAMI New Hampshire because we know that those services are able to prevent hospitalizations for kiddos. We've got a lot of kiddos that wait in ERs, and these are services that can prevent those waits in the ERs and can prevent hospitalizations. And NAMI New Hampshire has firsthand knowledge about how those services work because we provide family peer support services as part of the Fast Forward program. And one of the things that we have come to realize is how important these services are to our families, in that 45% of our staff currently are people who have gone through the program and successfully completed the program and gotten so much out of it that they themselves wanted to become family peer support workers and help out other families. So it's a true testament about how well these services work for folks. And currently, private insurance carriers do not cover the Fast Forward wraparound services in New Hampshire. And despite not having coverage through the private insurance carriers, families can still access the Fast Forward programs through grants that are in, money that the department has, as well as Medicaid. Kiddos who have been hospitalized in the past can qualify for Katie Beckett, but ones that have not do not qualify for Katie Beckett. So there's a lot of families who qualify for the services but do not qualify for Katie Beckett. And although the department does have funds to pay for those individuals and the families to have these services, we know that a lot of referrals come in from all over the place. And we know that there may be concerns from families and from, providers or people in the schools who might think, well, you've got private insurance doesn't pay for these services. They may not know what the department has. And so these referrals are likely not getting made at this point in time because the insurers are not paying for the services. So we do think that there are a lot of families out there that qualify for the services and could likely get the services if they knew that the department had the funds to pay for them. But then the question is, where should that burden fall? Should the burden fall on the taxpayers of New Hampshire through either Medicaid or through the department to pay for these services? Or should that burden also fall partially on the insurers who have an obligation to provide services to these families? So for those reasons, we support this bill, and I will answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Heidi. Any questions? Senator Whitley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to clarify, we are essentially, would you agree that we are essentially subsidizing care for privately insured kids in Fast Forward?
Yes.
And is it your position that maybe we need to rebalance a little bit so the state is not subsidizing that
Well,
care?
I think that we could get to a point where the state decides that they can't afford to subsidize it. And then what happens to those kids? The kids that have commercial insurance that don't qualify for Katie Beckett. If the money comes out of the budget, how do those kids get paid for? And not only that, the money that's currently paying for those kids in Fast Forward, if the insurance was paying part of that, those services, then that money could be reallocated to help with other services that maybe aren't covered and can't be covered by insurance. So that's another reason as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Devin, you're up next, and then Sabrina Dunlap.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Devin Quinn. I'm the Director of Policy at the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, where we invest in equality and opportunity for women and girls in New Hampshire through research, education, advocacy, and grant making. We're in support of this bill, not just because it is the next step in supporting youth mental health, but specifically girls' mental health. Girls' mental health is an issue that we are closely tracking at the Women's Foundation and supporting any efforts to improve access to care for girls specifically. Girls have higher rates of depression, have higher rates of considering suicide, higher rates of making a plan to attempt suicide and self-harm than their male peers. Multiracial girls and lesbian and bisexual girls have additionally higher rates of poor mental health than their peers. However, girls are also more likely to ask for help, and they're more likely to receive services from the New Hampshire Crisis Text Line. And also, I have a lot of graphs here that might be helpful to look at, but on the third page, there's also another graph that shows that in both girls enrolled in private insurance and Medicaid, girls are receiving any type of mental health service at higher rates than their male or boys in either private or Medicaid. So I wanted to support this bill specifically because it will make an impact on girls' mental health.
Thank you, Devin. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sabrina. And then after Sabrina is Heidi, and right now she's our last, she would be our last speaker. Did they sign up?
No,
I'm just under the gun.
Thank you, Chair Birdsall and members of the committee. I will try to keep this brief. My name is Sabrina Dunlap. I'm Director of Government Relations for Anthem. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on SB 411. Like other recent mental health bills, we're conceptually aligned and supportive of and cover the services listed in the bill. It's not totally clear to us why legislation is necessary, and we do have some concerns with the language. I did just want to speak quickly to SB 70 because I was in all of those meetings, and I wish Senator Prentice was here to hear this because I would like to address her question about how we actually dug down. And in fact, we met repeatedly for probably close to a year. And we did actually really drill down into the CPT code specifically. And in fact, for many of the carriers, there was a sort of mismatch where we were covering the wraparound services, but because this community mental health centers were much more familiar with Medicaid coding and billing, there was a misunderstanding around how to properly bill and code. So in fact, often they weren't even using the codes that were available for the services. So I actually thought that was an incredibly useful sort of ad hoc committee where we did come together. We were eager to come together and discuss the issues. And so I have sort of a different perspective on that than some of the other folks here, I guess. But I think it's an example of a very useful non-legislative solution. We would support what the commissioner mentioned in terms of coming together. I do want to clarify, we were brought in on SB 70. We were at the table. We were not brought in on SB 411. And so I just wanted to clarify that, you know, if we're not part of the conversation, it's difficult to be part of the solution. I also just want to note that we already cover the many services listed here. You know, we do not want kids in the emergency room. We do not want kids in the hospital. We cover emergency and crisis assessment and management, stabilization, in-home services, emergency department diversion. We work with a number of providers who use an innovative mix of in-person, sort of brick and mortar, and telehealth and virtual care to increase access and to think creatively about these issues, because we cannot automatically fix the provider shortage issue, so we can control what we can control. And so we do the best we can by partnering with innovative providers. And I had a couple of flags with the actual language in the RSA that was chosen, but I think we can have that conversation offline. I did just want to flag that. But I think it might be better suited for a different section of statute. So anyway, just to wrap up, we're supportive of the concepts. We would love to be brought into the conversation. We're eager to have these conversations. I think that we can come to understandings around these complicated billing and coding issues when we are around the table together. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Do you want to, Sabrina, do you want to quickly go, since Senator Prentice is here?
Yes, you
had some questions. Senator
I was
Prentice,
just
she was gonna
trying to address your question to the other folks who spoke, because I was in those SB 70 meetings, and to your question about like how do we get to the actual issue and resolve it. In those meetings, we actually discussed the specific CPT codes, and one of the things that was happening is that commercial carriers use certain codes. We were covering the wraparound services at issue, but the community mental health centers
there needed to be further education around what codes to use, how to use them. So I think sometimes improper codes were being used and sometimes they weren't even billing the commercial carriers. And so in those meetings, we actually did drill down into the contract level. We worked directly with the CMHCs, and I thought it was actually a very useful and productive and collaborative way to work on these issues. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. I just want to be clear that it's not just about one company. There are many companies. Anthem was certainly at the table. I appreciate that. Not every carrier was. I want to be clear
Mhm.
about that. I also want to be clear that we met in depth with the DHHS and Department of Insurance, and they assured us that the carriers were involved. So I think it's very unfair to say that you were not included in this process because we were told by the Department of Insurance that you were doing that. So I want to be clear about that. And I do understand that New Futures had met with you as well.
That was after the bill was filed, and I'm not trying to argue, but we were not brought in on the conversations. So
You will be now.
it sure will. I hope
Well,
so.
that's because the Department of Insurance said that they were involving them. So that's a fair characterization.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Heidi?
Good afternoon, honorable members of the Senate HHS Committee. For the record, my name is Heidi Kroll. I represent AHIP, which is America's Health Insurance Plans, which is the trade association for the health insurance carriers. I know the hour is getting late, so I will be very brief. I think it's clear that the carriers are supportive of the concepts in the bill and very much support participating in a stakeholder process to try to end the ships passing in the night, as the prior description was used. A few things that haven't been said that I just wanted to flag for folks. Whether this goes into RSA 417 or some other insurance statute, I just wanted to be clear that at the state level, the state can only regulate fully insured plans. The individual market, the small group market, and the large group market, fully insured. Self-funded plans are not regulated at the state level. And I just wanted to, for the employer coverage, that is about, the fully insured employer coverage is about 20% of the total New Hampshire insurance market. Nearly 34% is self-funded employer coverage. So I just want to kind of set some expectations that even if we, come to a resolution with the carriers and the insurance department and the providers, it's not going to cover everybody. It's not going to cover every commercially covered life because there are many, many commercial covered lives that are in the self-funded market. It's also important to know that even if you have a fully insured employer product, if that employer is located out of state and does not have brick and mortar here in New Hampshire, they are also not covered by New Hampshire laws. So if you work for an employer that's based in Massachusetts or Maine or Vermont, or frankly any other state in the country because you're working remotely, you would not be covered by this law. So I just want to be clear that it could feel like, even if we solve all of these issues, it might feel like in the future, carriers are still not meeting their obligation. And it's just because there's just a narrow scope of who you can cover in the insurance statutes here in New Hampshire. There are definitely some kind of mechanical issues with the bill, but I don't think we need to get into those now. But fundamentally, it seems to ignore the fact that we passed SB 85 last year because it's trying to put in the same section that SB 85 put in. And also just making sure that we're being clear about what is in fact emergency services listed here and what are not emergency services, because right now they're all being listed under emergency services. So I think those are things that we can also talk about in the stakeholder meeting. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Heidi. Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Heidi was the last speaker. Though, if there's anyone who would like to speak, he raised his hand first. Come on up.
Sorry, I was novice and didn't check the speaking box when I signed in. I'm Dr. Todd Morell. I am an emergency physician. I practice in the often mentioned emergency department at Dartmouth Hitchcock. The situation for kids in the emergency room is a very difficult situation at this point, and there are many kids in crisis. And I realize the purpose of this bill is not to address the crisis situation. I would point out that that is still a very important part of care for these children. I don't want to repeat the things that were said, but many of these services have been cited as being preventative so as to avoid crisis. But I would say that the line for when a child falls into crisis is not always a clear line. And it is also possible that having guaranteed access to other services can take a child from requiring inpatient care to potentially be treated as an outpatient. But if those services are not available, we move more and more children into required hospitalization and inpatient care and long waiting times in the emergency department. So I'm strongly in favor of the bill. We desperately need these resources for the children in New Hampshire to not wind up in crisis or to have alternatives to inpatient care. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor. Any questions? Seeing none? Thank you. You had a question? I mean, you wanted to speak?
Thank you. For the record, my name is Rebecca Ross. I'm the director of the Bureau for Children's Behavioral Health at DHHS, and I just wanted to make a couple points of clarification based on the prior testimony. While the department's neutral on the bill at this time, we certainly support any effort to increase access to all children and families to behavioral health services. And in an effort to continue to move that forward, I wanted to clarify that while we do support a small number of families through our high fidelity wraparound care management entity service Fast Forward, we do not have a specific budget or allocation to do that. We are able to use a small amount of general funds prior to Medicaid enrollment to cover some families and bridge that gap, but we are not built, and those would not be funds that could be reallocated if we are not paying for it. We just struggle to close that gap for those families that need it. And additionally, with regard to the codes, it really is the details. And while there is some commercial coverage of wraparound, and some of that is provided through our CMHCs or our community mental health centers, that is not the same as the Fast Forward program that's provided through our care management entities that was created through the system of care and is required in RSA 135F. That high fidelity wraparound service is serving more than 500 families at any point in time to have that high intensity in-home community-based service, and it does not, it is not covered by any commercial entities at this time, or alternatively, if it's a covered code in their contract, there are no commercial companies paying for the care management Fast Forward service through our two care management entities. So I wanted to make that clarification that when we're talking about the Fast Forward program, they're not receiving any commercial payments at this time. And I'm happy to take any other questions.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca. Is there anyone else here that hasn't had an opportunity to speak but would like on Senate Bill 411? With that, I will close the hearing. And I'll give Cam just an update. We have 3 bills we're going to be hearing. Senate Bill 499, Senate Bill 399, and Senate Bill 497. Those are the next 3 bills.
Remind you of anything?
I know, I love it so much.
Stand against the wall.
No.
Okay, I am just going to make an announcement. I'm sure people won't like to hear, but we have this bill, we have 399, then we have 497. So I'm going to ask, except for the presenters, I'm going to ask people to limit their testimony to no more than 3 minutes. I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 499.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon again, members of the committee. I am grateful to be here with my colleague from District 9, Senator Denise Ricciardi, to introduce Senate Bill 499. For the record, my name is Becky Whitley. I'm honored to serve New Hampshire Senate District 15, which includes the communities of Bow, Concord, Pennacook, and Hopkinton. I want to say to the committee that there are a few issues that keep me up at night more than food insecurity in our state. It really feels unimaginable to me in a state like New Hampshire, but there are far too many people in our state that still do not have enough food to eat for themselves or for their families. In October 2023, over half of New Hampshire children and 44% of adults lived in households that reported having insufficient food. We are a state where over half of New Hampshire children live in households that reported not having enough food. No one should have to wonder where their next meal will come from. Yet far too many Granite Staters have to choose between food and other crucial needs like medicine, electricity, or childcare. I would ask for 1 minute, you put yourself in the shoes of a parent who has to put their hungry child to bed, or of an elderly parent or grandparent who has worked their entire lives, yet struggles to make ends meet and has to choose between a roof over their head and groceries. We simply can't ignore that hunger is happening in New Hampshire, but we are not helpless to solve this problem. We know how to fix the problem of hunger and food insecurity. We just need the political will to make it happen. The bill before you today includes a comprehensive set of measures to reduce food insecurity for children, people with disabilities, and older adults in New Hampshire. We cannot take a small bite of the apple in solving hunger. We have to address this problem with smart policy. And this is smart policy because it will support our schools, leverage federal dollars, which will support New Hampshire communities, local communities, and invest in our economic future. The first step is ensuring that everyone who is eligible for existing federal nutrition program is actually enrolled. Unfortunately, the way we're doing things in New Hampshire is leaving too many of our neighbors, including children, older adults, and people with disabilities, disconnected from the resources that already exist to help them. This bill, which we are calling the Hunger-Free New Hampshire Act, would help to feed more children meals in schools and help to ensure that they aren't hungry during the summer when they aren't in school. It would also help more older adults and people with disabilities to connect to programs that can help them avoid food insecurity. By making modest investments to leverage federal dollars and by removing barriers, we can end hunger in our state. This comprehensive anti-hunger legislation was crafted to remove barriers, streamline program administration, and increase participation in these critical nutrition support programs. Once we understand the complete fiscal impact of the bill, of course, I anticipate adding an appropriation to the bill, and I anticipate that to evolve as we understand more. I truly want to thank the Departments of Education and Health and Human Services for all their work on behalf of New Hampshire families and for their partnership in this work. I respectfully ask the committee to support the Hunger Free New Hampshire Act to help us fight hunger in New Hampshire. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer general questions. The more technical questions I will defer to the very smart folks behind me. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. For the record, Denise Ricciardi, State Senator, District 9. I want to talk a little bit about why this bill matters. Of course, we all know that all children deserve an equal opportunity to thrive in school. That's important not just for the child, but also for our schools and our state's future. Because a child's brain is built from the bottom up with strong foundations essential to later physical, cognitive, and emotional well-being. We must ensure that early environments are working to support strong foundations. That's why school meals are critical for young children. Not having good nutrition creates a fragile foundation very early in life, and we all know you can't build something strong on a shaky foundation. Hunger affects children of all ages. Children can't concentrate when they're hungry, and as a result, their ability to learn is compromised. Our teenagers are also more likely to skip meals so their younger siblings can eat. Making sure our kids are getting the nutrition support they need in school is critical to them, their families, and the future of our state. We need to make it easier and less stigmatizing for kids to simply eat meals and healthy snacks so they can thrive. In October of 2023, over half, about 52% of New Hampshire children and 35% of older adults lived in households that reported having insufficient food. And this data came from the Census Household Pulse Survey. We know that high costs of housing, childcare, and other essentials have caused an increasing number of Granite Staters to have trouble making ends meet. And that includes affording nutritious food. Over 100,000 adults over 65 in New Hampshire said they had insufficient food in October. We need to make it easier for them to get SNAP. Older adults who receive SNAP typically have improved food security, better nutrition, improved health, which also includes lowering their health care costs, reduced hospital and nursing home admissions. But right now, we're underutilizing the very programs that could help children and older adults avoid hunger. Senate Bill 499 would change that. Senate Bill 499 is a comprehensive, multi-pronged bill that makes small investments to leverage federal dollars and to give more children access to meals in school and during the summer. It will help eligible older adults benefit from SNAP. And this will mean fewer hungry people in our state, better health care, better educational outcomes for our children, people living with disabilities, and older adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. Do you have a question?
I have a question.
Senator Avard.
Thank you, and thanks for your testimonies, Senators. Under the fiscal note, it looks like 25 million and 15 million in 26 and 15 million in 27. But under the footnotes, it says this bill does not provide sufficient funding to cover estimated expenditures. And it says that it doesn't authorize new positions to implement this bill. What would that cost?
Right, thank you for that question. So because this bill was so early in the calendar, we just got the fiscal note. And so I mentioned in my testimony, I certainly anticipate an appropriation coming forward as we sort of work through those numbers. So one thing I wanted to mention in terms of the appropriation is, for example, the community eligibility provision. The Department of Education rightly has to provide us costs if every school and every child was to participate. But for example, when we had community eligibility during the pandemic, we only saw participation at like 46% for breakfast and 70% for lunch. So what they're providing is the information for 100% participation, which is, you know, the outer limit. So that's what we are working through right now. And once we have a very clear sense about what it costs, we absolutely plan to add an appropriation. We have been working with the Department of Ed, again, because this was over the holidays. There's maybe some technical fixes, again, to make sure we're fully aligning with federal requirements, and they have been active participants at the table, and we anticipate an amendment coming forward to reflect that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senators. John Arigaso. No? Okay. Brian Clark and Debbie Sorty from HHS. No, they're just here for information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Brian Clark with the Department of Health and Human Services. I have with me today
Deborah Sorley, Department of Health and Human Services, Bureau of Family Assistance.
And so we're here to say that we have submitted a letter of intent to do the summer EBT program, but we've identified several barriers, including that state administrative funding will need to be provided. But if those barriers are addressed in legislation, we're prepared to move forward. And I'm available for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say, in addition to DHHS has absolutely been at the table as well. So I didn't want to omit you in my thank yous for your partnership.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Oh, what?
So
Oh.
I'm looking through the
Bradley?
fiscal note. What is the cost of that EBT program that you're going to implement?
So the summer EBT program is not the bulk of the cost of the legislation.
I know that.
Yeah, okay. So 1.3 million was what our cost would be. However, for the administrative cost, 50% would be from federal funding.
Of that 1.3,
Yes.
All right, so looking at the fiscal note, so the summer EBT program is at the end. It's the addition of all of those particular cost items, but is it a 50-50 match?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you.
meaning
And what was the cost? I
the
don't have
total.
So the total state cost then would be 650K?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
Nope.
I was just going to add, I'm sorry, basically that's the startup cost, if you will. So we have to just remember that every year summer EBT is something that is to be permanent from conception forward, if you will. So there will always be additional costs for maintenance and all kinds of things that come along with the program. So that is just our initial cost right there.
Thank you. All right, and no other questions? Thank you very much. Laura Milliken. I'm going on the back of it too.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Milliken from New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. I'm the executive director. And I have put my testimony under things. Sorry. So good afternoon, Chairman Bertzel and honorable members of the committee. We think of our food system, of our system of food and nutrition supports like a power grid that moves healthy food to communities and households. But in New Hampshire, the grid is well developed in some areas and not well developed in other areas. Senators Whitley and Ricciardi have already testified that the federal nutrition programs that exist to help people in need are poorly connected with in New Hampshire. So we're third from the bottom in older adult participation in SNAP of all the states in the country. We're also third from the bottom of the states in school breakfast participation. Only about 46% of the children who participate in free and reduced lunch currently participate in school breakfast. Summer meal programs aren't evenly distributed throughout the state, and we're not really getting the word out about them. So to foster the health and well-being of New Hampshire residents, we need to make sure that all communities and eligible people are connected to those programs, and that's what SB 499 is attempting to do. The bill would remove barriers, improve administration, and increase participation in the programs. And I'll briefly, as briefly as I can, go over the 8 pieces, because there really are quite a number of different pieces of the bill. The first 2 pieces aim to improve participation in school breakfast. There's a great deal of evidence to show that school breakfast has measurable benefits on child learning, health, and behavior. And I didn't give you the testimony and the supporting documents, but there, I've included some summaries of the research on the importance of breakfast. So the first provision would require the few schools in the state not currently offering the school breakfast program to offer them. Schools with below 10% free and reduced lunch participation would be exempted. So we estimate that there are just a few schools that would be affected. The second piece is to encourage schools to change the way they offer breakfast. One of the reasons that so few participate in breakfast is that most schools only offer breakfast early in the morning, before school starts, and in the cafeteria. Many children can't get to school that early. And in only offering breakfast before the bell, the breakfast in the cafeteria results in stigma. Pretty fast, the practical reality is that many children would rather go hungry at school than be called out as a poor kid. Breakfast after the bell is an evidence-based approach that makes breakfast a part of the school day. Some schools do this by grab-and-go carts in the hall. Some use healthy breakfast vending
That's 3
machines.
minutes.
Pardon me? Okay. Okay, so there are pieces in the bill that relate to connecting more children living in families with low incomes to eat meals in school. I've provided an explainer on what the community eligibility provision is. It's a USDA provision that would allow for schools with high levels of poverty to serve meals to all students in the school, regardless of their incomes. The federal government reimburses at a higher rate for those schools. And then there's a piece that would have the state pick up the reduced price costs. There's another piece has to do with an online school meals application, which we would believe would reduce stigma. The next 2 provisions relate to summer meals. We know that school-age children are far more food insecure in the summer, and the bill will help that. And finally, there's a piece to attach eligible older adults and people with disabilities to SNAP. You'll see that the bill has a significant fiscal note. We believe the fiscal note overstates the cost, especially of the community eligibility provision, because it assumes, as the senator said, a higher level of participation than actually participated during the pandemic. And there are other ways of limiting the costs. The bill does require some investment to leverage many more federal dollars. And we know that there's a high return on investment for both SNAP and school meals. The dollars are spent in our communities to benefit all of us, grocers, farmers, suppliers of food. So I urge you that this is an investment not just in the health of individuals, but in the public health of our state and the future of our state. I urge you to vote ought to pass. Thank you.
Nicely done. Any questions? Senator Bradley?
Thank you. Not to be argumentative, but your testimony indicates that over half of New Hampshire children experience food insecurity. I just went on the website of Feeding America, and they say that in New Hampshire, 1 in 12 children, so about 8%, face food insecurity. Can you sort of
Sure.
give
So,
me an idea
so
of
the measure,
great disparity?
absolutely. So the food insecurity measure from Feeding America is based on the census every 10 years measure of poverty. The numbers that we're quoting are from the Census Pulse survey. So the census started doing a telephone survey in all states during the pandemic and has been doing it. It was more frequent, but now it's every month. And we've been monitoring that, and people are asked, did you have enough food in the last 7 days, and did you have enough of the right kinds of food? And those are the numbers that we're citing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Trisha LaBelle, and I'm a resident of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I have a child in the school system, and I've worked several years in the school kitchens in Rockingham County, and I'm here to support SB 499. During my time, I fed many hungry children. I could share 100 different stories of school meals and the stigma associated with certain aspects of it, but I feel it's best to share my own. When my son was in kindergarten, I remember getting my first meal application and looking at it as a person who would have qualified and thinking, no way, how embarrassing. I'd have to fill out this packet and send it back in with him to give to his teacher. I was way too concerned that his teacher would then label him as a free and reduced child. That was a risk that I wasn't willing to take, even though I was working for school nutrition at the time. My question is, if we're supposed to not know who free and reduced children are, how can a big paper packet be a parent's only choice for some school districts? Another reason I support SB 499 is because breakfast after the bell normalizes eating breakfast at school. It becomes more about feeding hungry children and less about who's free and reduced. Traditional breakfast misses way too many kids. When I served breakfast at the elementary school, buses were often late, children were anxious and stressed, trying to rush to eat breakfast before the bell, and some would skip breakfast just to get to school on time. Some teachers understood the importance of breakfast and allowed children to finish in their classroom, but not all teachers did that. Many students felt embarrassed arriving to class late and having to explain that they were in the cafeteria eating breakfast. During COVID, we were serving about double the amount of children, and teachers were able to normalize eating breakfast because it encouraged all students to eat breakfast, not just the free and reduced kids. So please support SB 499.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Lauren Colifrath?
Thank you to the committee for letting me be here today. Crowded room. I'm here today to speak in support of SB 499, the Hunger Free New Hampshire Act. My name is Lauren Colifrath, and I'm a program coordinator for End 68 Hours of Hunger, which is a private, not-for-profit that provides weekend meals for our school children in need that are otherwise going without. I know that some of our elected officials have said that There are no hungry children in New Hampshire in the schools. That statement is staggering in both ignorance and surety and is simply untrue. All across the state, there are N68 hours of hunger programs that do nothing but try to alleviate hunger in our schools. In Dover alone, we are packing over 150 bags each week for children ages K through 8th grade. Why do you think that might be? Because there is hunger in our schools. Trying to fabricate any other reason is beyond absurd, and I've heard them all. Trying to come up with reasons to not provide children with food crosses absurdity and enters the realm of maliciousness. Whether their parents work or are unemployed, whether or not they're on drugs, whether or not you think they misspend their SNAP assistance, there has never and will never be a good reason to deny our children food. Voting in favor of this bill brings about only positives. Study after study, case after case, by every available and measurable metric, caring for the vulnerable of our society benefits all of us, and that includes long-term lowered expenses in education and healthcare. To do otherwise is short-sighted and costs us as a society in the long run in every way. Voting against this bill can serve only one purpose that I can see, and it's to punish children and families for being poor, something that we should all know is not out of which is out of a child's control and usually out of a family's control as well. This problem should not be viewed as insurmountable, and indeed this bill would be a very important, measurable, and unmistakably positive step in the direction of improving the quality of life for our school children, and I encourage everyone to vote in favor of it. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Marcy Stein. And next one up is Ann Hayes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I have a written testimony here too. Honorable Chair and members of the committee, thank you for your time today. My name is Marcy Stone and I'm a resident of Somersworth, New Hampshire. I'm also an N68 Hours of Hunger Program Coordinator in the town of Somersworth. So Lauren and I met today for the first time, which was really nice. I'm here to support SB 499, the Hunger Free New Hampshire Act. Lauren talked a little bit about N68 Hours of Hunger. Something that's important to mention is that the 68-hour reference in N68 Hours is the estimated time between when a student gets a free school lunch on Friday to the time when they get a free school breakfast on Monday. And we as an organization are making an assumption that those children and their parents have applied for, are eligible for, and have accepted those free meals that have been offered to them. We heard a little bit from other folks about the fact that there is a significant stigma. We experience that. We see that every day at N68 Hours of Hunger. Little kids in the elementary schools love our bags. They take them with joy. They're excited to take goodies home to their families. When kids hit about 4th grade, the stigma begins and kids don't want to take the bags anymore. I have a very good friend of mine, has 3 kids over the age of 10, and she's a single mom working a really hard retail job, $15 an hour. She gets state aid, and she knows that I coordinate the local program and knows that I could help her if she wanted, but her kids will not take the bags. They're too proud. The stigma is very real. Until this year, we did not serve our middle and high school students. They refused to take bags. And we've had to work really hard with our school nurses and our crisis interventionists and the front office staff to get really stealthy about how we get the bags to them. This week, we packed 50 bags for the middle and high school students, and we're packing about 150 bags every week for students in Somersworth. So the need is very, very real, and the stigma is very, very real, and we are just touching the tip of the iceberg in terms of need. Awareness has been a really big challenge since COVID. When kids were out of schools, they didn't need our services. There were so many resources available to community members who could find food. The schools were dropping off free lunches at bus stops, which was wonderful. But when we came back to schools, we really had to rebuild that awareness. So we're seeing our numbers grow exponentially post-COVID, and also because of the rising costs that we're all experiencing every day. So while some families may not be eligible for the free school meals right now, there are a lot of families that need it and haven't asked for it because they don't know how, they don't know where to go, or they're just embarrassed. So I just want to close by saying summer bags is another big problem that this bill would solve for. Some of my fellow N68 Hours of Hunger organizations are
That's
able to
3
do,
minutes.
thank you, summer bags, but we haven't been able to do it yet because many of our families don't have transportation to come pick up bags. So I personally delivered summer bags last year. As a mother and a community member, it breaks my heart to know that there are students sitting in schools right now who are fighting hunger. And they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. So I'm asking you to support SB 499 today because we have to do better for our children. We have to do better for the future of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Ann Hayes and then Renee Berkeley.
Hi, Honorable Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Ann Hayes and I'm the Executive Director at Gather. We are one of the largest direct service food access organizations in New Hampshire and one of the oldest social service agencies in the country. And I'm here today to speak in support of SB 499 and to share what we're seeing on the ground in an agency that serves people from about 50 New Hampshire towns. What we're seeing in the last 2 years, and this is post-COVID, is about a 40% increase in need. So in the number of people that we're serving day in and day out, it is up 40%. And we're also seeing an acceleration in that increase. So where last year we might have had 800 applications to be clients of ours, this year we had 1,000. Where it used to average 5 a day, we've had as many as 20 a day in December. So we're seeing that curve increase. We're seeing more and more need. You know, inflation has subsided in terms of the rate of increase, but the prices haven't gone back down. And people are living on fixed incomes and they don't have the wherewithal to make it. We have too many people who are living close to the edge. What we're also seeing is, you know, we run about 40 mobile markets a month across the greater Seacoast, and we're seeing more than double the number of people that we saw every month last year versus this year. At the same time, there's been a very big decrease in the amount of in-kind food that we're receiving. So we're down about 300,000 pounds versus 2 years ago. So we distribute about 30,000 pounds of food every single week. And that's down substantially. So that's 10 weeks less of food that we have. And, you know, that's just increasing the pressure with the need going up and the amount of food available going down. You know, Gather's caught, like many other agencies, is caught in the middle of that. I had a meeting with my director of operations today, and he said to me, you know, we're seeing where we used to see last year at this time 30 or 40 people a day coming through our pantry. We're seeing 70 and 80 plus people a day. Mm-hmm. And there comes a point where we just can't get that many people through, and we're going to have to start turning people away, and we aren't going to have enough food. So we can't necessarily solve that problem as an individual agency, even as big as we are. And really the answer is in the federal nutrition programs. We hear from a lot of the people that we serve that it is just too hard to get SNAP benefits. And you know, we in New Hampshire are leaving federal money on the table. It is a very small amount that New Hampshire would have to pay relative to what we'll see coming into the economy. And to leave that money on the table, I think, is very short-sighted. We are forcing people because they don't have access to healthy food. They will be living with diet-related diseases. We can pay a little bit now, we can pay a lot more later. It's up to you know, the government to figure that out. But I can tell you the pressure on us is getting more and more significant. And I would ask that starting with this bill, you can address it with the most vulnerable, with children, with seniors, with people who are living with disabilities. That's a good start. And I think we need to start there.
Thank you, Renee. Any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. Anne.
Yeah.
Renee, you're next.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and committee members. I think you've heard it all from the testimonies. What I want to just share with you is from my heart. I moved into this state from Utah 2 years ago. I retired from healthcare in 2014, and I started driving improvements in the community. And in our community, state said there was no homelessness, and there were 68 kids that were homeless. State said there was no hunger. There was. And we opened up a food pantry, middle school closets. We quadrupled the number of snack packs that went home on the weekends. We developed a program through our food pantries where families, when school was out, they had food. They got all the food they needed, and we developed a summer lunch program. That was in Utah, and Utah's on the bottom because there's so many freaking kids in that state. They have large families there, but we were able to do that because we had the right players around the table who were willing to talk to each other and make things happen. I'm appalled at the poverty I've seen in New Hampshire. I live in Allstead. I represent the SAU 60 school district. So you have Walpole on one end, but then we have Ackworth, Charlestown, Langdon, and Allstead. Very different demographics. And when I worked the first fall festival for that school, I looked at these families and all I kept thinking was the Aerosmith song, Living on the Edge. There are so many families living on the edge that are barely making ends meet. When the CARES funds were available during a massive COVID panic that we never went through before, we dropped childhood poverty down to like 5%. Then the money went poof, and it's back up to 12.4. We know the root cause is poverty, but hunger is a big part of it. It's not rocket science. It's fixable. It's a matter of taking advantage of the resources and doing what's right for the children, because they are the future. So what message are you sending people who've moved to New Hampshire like myself? What is your priority? Is it live free and die? Or is it live free, be poor and hungry? Or can we turn this around? I'm getting a dirty look. Can we turn this around and say, New Hampshire is a state that's small enough, can get the resources together, and make it live free and thrive, because the 3 states around you are providing free lunch and breakfast for all kids. Why is it New Hampshire? Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Elizabeth?
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak in front of you today. I am Elizabeth Bistany. I'm the Director of School Nutrition in Salem, New Hampshire. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how this affects kids in school every day. There's an obvious need for nutrition programs beyond those that are just qualifying students every day for free and reduced meals. There is the stigma of applying to the family, to the parents. There's also the stigma of the children that are trying to get the meals in the cafeterias before they go to class. One of the biggest things that we're looking at in our district is, and it's a very small free and reduced district, we're at about 14 to 16% depending on any given month. But one of the things that I'm seeing quite a bit of, and in speaking with nurses, principals, secretaries, I see those children going in for visits to the nurse. My stomach hurts. I haven't eaten today. By changing through SB 499, the way that breakfast is offered in the schools and offering it during their regular school day, the way lunch is, we would pull away that stigma of a student going into the cafeteria, trying to make it from the bus to the cafeteria to the classroom, when in fact there isn't enough time. I was just speaking with a student out here who gets dropped off at school 10 minutes before the bell rings for them to be in class. They have to go to a basement cafeteria, then cross the campus to get to their first class. That's unacceptable when during COVID we were actually feeding kids in the classrooms. Why can't we do that again now? I've seen our rates of participation of just the free and reduced students fall dramatically between breakfast and lunch. Back in 2021, I was looking at about a 50 to 60% participation of students who were getting free lunch, actually participating in breakfast. Now I'm lucky to see about 10% to 12% of those students actually receiving. And those are the kids that need it most. The other group that I want to speak about is the working poor, those people who fall between the cracks that are working every day to support their families and either just miss the cutoff for a reduced lunch or miss the cutoff for a free lunch, but can't provide for their students. By offering free breakfast or free lunch in the way that we do free breakfast, where there is a subsidy or a subsidizing of the free breakfast cost of 30 cents for students, I think we need to seriously look at providing that also for our reduced students who want to get lunch.
That's 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I really truly believe in is that we provide so much to students to help them succeed in school. We should be providing healthy meals for them as well. In summary, let's give the New Hampshire students the opportunities that we can afford them. And one of those is offering these meals, breakfast and lunch during the school day, and also helping those that are reduced also get those free lunches. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Dr. Cooperdock? Did I say that right? Okay. Then the next one up is Karen Hill.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Senator Birdsall, members of the Senate Health and Human Service Committee. My name is Dr. Sidra Cooperdock. I'm a family medicine resident in Concord. I work at a clinic that provides primary care to many families and members of our community that are considered underserved. Meals are available during the school day because nutrition is essential for health and students' ability to learn. Physical, cognitive, and emotional development depends on good nutrition, and we should be doing everything we can to connect our children to food and nutritional supports they need to thrive. Right now, we're falling behind in ways that SB 499 can address. Food insecurity increases the risk for several poor health outcomes, including type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, heart and kidney disease. And every day in my clinic, I see patients struggling with the complexities of these chronic diseases, managing their medication schedules, declining organ functions, and the aftermath of hospitalizations. These patients are mostly adults, but during their childhoods, most did not have consistent access to nutritious foods, and most of this was due to costs. When I recommend lifestyle changes to my patients or discuss nutrition with parents during well-child visits, I focus on vegetables and fruits, whole grains, lean meats, all of which cost much more than highly processed foods. SB 499 aims to reduce food insecurity and in turn help improve health outcomes. Studies show that when children eat breakfast and lunch at school, their households have better food security. Have better food security at schools or in general, just because the school meals reduce their overall grocery costs. Elementary schools and middle school students who eat school breakfast every day have overall more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, calcium and dairy and fiber than students who eat breakfast less frequently. School lunch has been shown to reduce obesity by at least 17%. Studies have found an association between school breakfast participation and lower probability of overweight and obesity, which can be associated with type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease later in life. And school meals also result in positive impacts on mental health, and this reduces behavioral problems, anxiety, and depression. Prevention is the best medicine. By providing school meals that are nutritious, we have the ability to help prevent many of the chronic diseases I treat every day. So maybe I won't have a job anymore. Just kidding. SB 499 also addresses food insecurity in older adults, another vulnerable and growing population in our community.
That's 3 minutes.
Okay, almost done. Physical and mental health outcomes are worse in this population with the presence of food insecurity because they often must choose between a meal or necessary medications. SNAP improves health outcomes and lowers costs. Evidence shows that older adults on SNAP typically have improved food security, better nutrition, improved health with lower healthcare costs, better medication adherence, and reduced hospital and nursing home admissions. SB 499 will help children, older adults, and people with disabilities. It will improve all overall health and reduce healthcare costs. I urge you to vote ought to pass on SB 499. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Karen? And next would be, after Karen, is Sarah Gates.
Good afternoon, Senators, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Karen Leo Hill. I am a 19-year city councilor and the former mayor of Lebanon. I want to offer my perspective first as a mother. I'm also the mom of 2 kids, and so who have both attended Lebanon public schools. So I've also been very familiar with public schools in Lebanon over the last 20 years as well. And I was the middle school PTO president for a number of years. I've seen over that time that the number of children facing food insecurity in Lebanon has increased. We are one of the top 10 schools in New Hampshire. We're a relatively well-to-do community, but food insecurity touches families in Lebanon as well, and we've seen this increase significantly in recent years. From my perspective as a city councilor, I would just like to share that we have added a community paramedic and community nurses in our combined fire and EMS program, and they make home visits. And one of the really heartbreaking reports that we have heard from them is their observations of food insecurity among our elderly population. And so I am here to offer my support for this bill and to encourage you to support this comprehensive approach to ending hunger in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Sarah? Last speaker is going to be Nancy Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and to the board. My name is Sarah Gates. I am the project coordinator for End 68 Hours of Hunger for the towns of Raymond and Fremont. I am also a teacher at Manchester Memorial High School through a community partner, Jobs for American Graduates. I'm a Boy Scout leader, and I'm also a Rockingham County 4-H leader. The last 3 are exclusively with teenagers. Pre-COVID, I was feeding 80 children a week in Raymond and Fremont alone. During COVID, thanks to the pandemic EBT, which is a higher dollar amount than the summer EBT planned, and the free breakfast and lunch, that number dropped almost 70% to 27, but it was never 0. Post-COVID, my numbers have already almost doubled, and I'm back up to 50 children a week in just Raymond and Fremont. In Manchester, I have a steady stream of children that I feed through my classroom pantry that I personally fund, at least half of which are not even students that have ever taken my class. They just know that I'm a safe place that offers food. I see the hunger in my Scouts and my Clover Buds at events as they go through the lines for meals 3 to 4 times because they keep coming back because they're not getting enough food otherwise, or they're sneaking rolls and things like that to bring home to save for later. Hunger is a very real issue for New Hampshire children, and passing this bill is only going to be one of the first steps to ending it. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? None?
Thank
Seeing
you.
none? Thank you. Nancy? Welcome.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Nancy Vaughn, Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association here in New Hampshire. I do have written testimony, so I am just going to touch on a few key points. I know a lot of what's in my written testimony has already been mentioned by others behind me, but the American Heart Association strongly supports Senate Bill 499. Food insecurity, which is a common cause of inadequate nutrition, contributes to disparities in chronic disease outcomes, especially for cardiovascular disease. So it is very important that we be here today. Many of the, or all of the provisions in Senate Bill 499 are something the American Heart Association supports because they help our most vulnerable, from kids from low-income families and older adults who may struggle to put nutritious food on their tables. But it really is the health impact from increasing or improving the nutrition within diets of children as well as elderly. Increased access to school meals for children not only fill their stomachs, but can help build a foundation for a lifetime of healthy behaviors. They get more whole grains and fruits and vegetables within a school meal than they might even with home-packed meals. And so this helps to create a preference for these foods as they go through life, and as adults can avoid developing chronic diseases. The community eligibility provision is something that's a very important tool, and it looks that Senate Bill 499 is seeking to incentivize school districts to apply for that. And again, enabling more of our senior residents living with food and nutrition insecurity, the access to more SNAP benefits will also have positive health benefits for the prevention of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes, which are very expensive illnesses for the state healthcare system. And with that, I will conclude my testimony and take any questions if you have any for me.
Any questions from the committee for Nancy? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We do have one more speaker, Dawn McKinney.
Sorry, that sounded kind of ominous. I promise I'll make it brief. Really, I think everything has been said. I'm Dawn McKinney. I'm with New Hampshire Legal Assistance. New Hampshire Legal Assistance also leads the advocacy work group for the Alliance for Healthy Aging, both entities of which are extremely supportive of this legislation. And I will just kind of touch on the elderly simplified application. I can't state enough how important that is. That is something that really we feel like is key to furthering the system of care work that was done last session, that I think all of you were very supportive of in terms of access to services for older adults so they can stay in their homes. This is one. Increasing access to SNAP for those folks is key to keeping them in their homes as well. And it is not an expansion. I should say, I wanted to just make that distinction. We're 47th in the country in terms of participation of eligible people. We're not changing eligibility here. We're just changing or trying to make it simpler for folks who are already eligible to access the benefits. And those benefits are federally funded dollars, with the exception of the state administrative costs. And those benefits get spent in the local communities and create an economic engine, impact in the communities with local grocers, et cetera. So with that, I think I touched on everything that I wanted to. If anyone has any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on Senate Bill 499 but was not given the opportunity? With that, I will close the hearing on 499.
Uh-oh. All right. So we're going to open up the hearing for SB 399 and hear from the prime sponsor. Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Regina Bertzel, Senator for District 19, the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Wyndham. And I am the prime sponsor on Senate Bill 399, which is a bill that expands mandatory health insurance coverage for blood tests associated with elevated lead levels. Basically, what this bill does, it just requires any and all costs associated with blood lead testing be conducted in accordance with RSA 130A:5A, which includes any and all costs associated with necessary follow-up testing. Because my understanding is we do have the initial, they do pay for the initial cost, but sometimes there's some follow-up costs that are associated with this, and they just want to ensure that it's covered. Childhood lead poisoning remains a public health crisis facing the state of New Hampshire. Lead poisoning can lead to development delays, learning disabilities, and other cognitive deficits that can follow children throughout their lifetimes. New Hampshire has one of the nation's oldest housing stocks, and more than 30,000 Granite State children are known to be living in older homes containing lead paint or lead-based paint. Between 2017 and 2021, the average of 535 children were found to have elevated blood lead levels each year. And my bill would eliminate a financial barrier to testing for families by clarifying that insurance carriers are required to cover the full costs of lead testing for New Hampshire families. In 2018, SB 247 was signed into law requiring blood lead testing for 1- and 2-year-olds. At the time, the legislature intended the legislation to require that insurers cover the full cost of testing with no cost share to families. In the years since, we have learned that some insurers have continued to pass down some of the costs to families through co-pays and co-insurance. So the New Hampshire Insurance Department recently revised its guidance and notified insurers they are required to cover full testing costs. And SB 399 aims to align state law with the Insurance Department guidance and to clarify that insurers cover the full cost of initial blood tests as well as any subsequent testing. And with that, I can take any questions, but there are people much smarter than me behind me.
Thank you, Senator, for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Not all at once now. All right. Thank you. And you want me to call up the next person? Senator Hosmer, would you like to testify? With Pilgrim, Harvard Pilgrim?
Yes. Thank you, Senator. For the record, Andrew Hosmer, representing Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Once again, much like an earlier bill, we're not opposed to the intent of this bill. We're just have some concerns about some language, and I think there's something that can be tightened up as far as some of the language maybe being too broad as to exactly what is the costs that are associated. And if we could bring a little specificity to it, I believe my client would be certainly happy to support this bill. So if there's an opportunity to continue to work on some of the language here and wordsmith it just a bit, I think we can find something that's a little better and they'd be happy with. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take a question if necessary.
Do you have any suggestions as, Madam Chair, if I may? Yes. Do you have any suggestions as far as?
No, but I know there were a number of conversations going on outside the hearing room talking about how the language could be clarified a little bit better.
Thank you.
So I think it's going to be easy enough. Thank you very much.
welcome.
Thank
again.
you. Thank you for the privilege of referring to me by my first name. That happens to me a lot. Yes, in law school, they called me Mr. Alex when they called on me. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Alex Feldwebel. I'm a health reform instructor for the insurance department. I'm here on behalf of the department today, testifying for informational purposes. We have been working with advocates for this bill since last summer when they raised questions about coverage for blood lead testing. And the result of our research is that well, let me just back up for a second. Our understanding of what this bill is trying to do, and it's important for me to clarify this, is to do two things. Eliminate the cost sharing for blood lead screening services, basically clarify that the coverage is no cost coverage. And number two, clarify that the coverage requirement with no cost sharing extends not only to the initial screening, but also to any follow-up testing necessary to diagnose the problem when the initial screening shows that there is a problem. So I want to speak to the first goal of the bill. We looked into that when we were approached last summer, and from my research, it seemed to me that under the Affordable Care Act, there, as you know, there's a requirement of no cost sharing for preventive services, and it turns out that the blood lead testing for children as required under RSA 130A5A is considered a preventive service. Under the federal definition, there were some steps of inference to get to that conclusion. So I spoke with a CMS official to confirm our interpretation, and they did confirm it. So what I'm saying is, under the Affordable Care Act, part one of what this bill does ought to be happening. The second part, which is coverage for subsequent screening when an initial screening has a positive result, that's an issue that CMS is struggling with right now as it applied to their rule about no cost sharing for preventive. They have issued guidance with respect to colorectal cancer screening, that if you have non-invasive screening and if it's positive, then your subsequent colonoscopy has to be without cost sharing. But they haven't addressed the blood lead issue. So this bill would constitute a clarification of something that has yet been unclarified at the federal level so far as step two. I wanted to mention two technical issues and just conclude with that. I believe I confer with the previous comments from Senator Hosmer about the existence in the bill of some very sort of broad, vague language. And in the testimony, which I hope went all the way around, I've actually drafted a correction for it that I believe would be acceptable to all the parties. And there's one more, I hesitate to mention, highly technical issue. The second part, where CMS has not clarified, so it might be going beyond what CMS would require. If it's applied to high deductible plans, it might interfere with the tax preferred status of those plans. So there's language in other parts of the insurance statutes that exempt, that's wherever it says, here's a mandate and there should be no cost sharing, it also has an extra sentence that says, except for high deductible plans. So it might be good to give consideration to have an exception for high deductible plans. I tried to make this fast. Was that good enough?
Thank you. Question?
Just, yeah, you had that language for the clarification for the broad language? with you?
Yes, I do.
Or is
It's
that-
in
is that
the
in this?
flip side, the second bullet, the letter A. It's in there in quotations.
Second bullet. Oh, dude, I was looking right at it. I'm dyslexic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. My name is Jake Berry. I'm the Vice President of Policy at New Futures. As many of you know, New Futures is a nonpartisan, nonprofit health policy and advocacy organization. We've been working for years to increase access to quality, affordable health care and to improve health equity across our state. I don't want to repeat too much of what's already been said, but I do want to stress our strong support for this bill. I know I don't need to tell you about the devastating impact that lead exposure and lead poisoning continues to have on children and families across New Hampshire. Lead exposure can cause significant damage to a child's brain and nervous system. It can slow growth and cause physical, developmental, and behavioral challenges. And it can severely increase health costs facing our families, our communities, and our state. You and your colleagues in the Senate recognized these risks back in 2018 when you passed SB 247. And this legislation mandated blood lead testing for 1 and 2-year-olds and lowered the blood action level that triggers intervention by the state. We believed at the time that it established that insurers would cover the full cost of this testing and that families wouldn't have to pay a cent. But as mentioned earlier, we've come to learn over the years since that insurers have continued to pass down a part of the cost to families through co-pays or co-insurance or other cost sharing. We believe strongly that these charges not only challenge the legislative intent of the prior legislation, but they impose financial barriers to testing for many of the state's most vulnerable families. We appreciate that the insurance department is in the process of revising its guidance, and instructing insurers to cover the full cost, but we believe SB 399 is necessary to codify this requirement into law and ensure families going forward that they're not left to carry the testing costs into the future. With that in mind, we encourage you to vote ought to pass, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jake. Can I ask you to work with the department and Andrew Hosmer to get some language so I can amend it?
Certainly.
Okay.
None of this sounds out of bounds from what we're intending at all, so I'm sure we're happy to work through it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Heidi. Oh.
Good afternoon. Heidi Tremarco with the Conservation Law Foundation. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the
come next
committee. I'm sorry, did I?
Nope, you're fine.
You're fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is not something I experience a lot as a Heidi. There's Emily's and Jessica's and Jennifer's in my cohort that have different experiences, but as a Heidi, I don't get that very often, so I'm sorry. But I will keep it very short. I know we're running late. I just want to express CLF's strong support of SB 399 and echo the comments from New Futures. And I won't add on to those. You've heard, you know a lot about the dangers of lead poisoning and the numbers that show that children, you know, on average 500 plus children in New Hampshire a year are having blood test levels showing elevated blood lead levels. And so that really drives home the importance of closing this gap in the bill and ensuring this insurance coverage covers those tests. I do have one, I did notice one correction, like a typo, RSA cross-reference in the bill that needs to be fixed, and I spoke with New Futures about that, and we can get that going.
Work with Jake on that one.
I will, and we've connected on that, so we'll have that to you.
Great. All right. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heidi Kroll. I'm sorry, Heidi. What was your last name?
My last name is Heidi Trimarco, Trimarco.
Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Heidi Kroll. I work at Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell, and I'm here today representing AHIP, which is America's Health Insurance Plans. I will try to be very brief. We support the amendments. I haven't seen them, but I have talked with them. The amendments that the department spoke about, we think those clarifications are important in terms of addressing the any and all cost associated with language, tightening that up, and also addressing the high deductible health plan, just to make sure that we're not harming patients in terms of giving them a tax liability that they're not expecting. I did want to point out, just for clarification, that the current law, to my understanding, the carriers I've spoken with have been covering this without a cost share. But to the extent carriers have not been doing that, that was allowed, whether it was the intent or not, it was allowed or has been allowed under current law, where it does say benefits provided under this section shall not be subject to any greater co-payment, deductible, or co-insurance than any other similar benefits provided by the insurer. So what was actually put into law was a parity provision. So I just wanted to point that out. Also, to the extent that kind of the part two that Alex was talking about in terms of extending no cost sharing to the follow-up testing. That's obviously a policy decision, but just recognizing that is any costs that have been picked up by cost sharing for follow-up testing, those would then be shifted into premiums or other aspects of plan design in terms of other co-pays, co-insurance, deductibles, or whatever. So this, insurance is like a balloon. If the costs are there, if you squeeze it out of one place, that gets squeezed into another place. So just flagging that. And also, if in fact no cost sharing for the follow-up testing is not in the ACA, then you're going to have the self-funded plans will still be able to do a cost share on the follow-up testing. So just wanted to make people aware of that. And I think, part of the confusion happens often where your health insurance card looks very similar, whether it's a fully insured or a self-funded coverage, because a lot of carriers are third-party administrators for the self-funded plans. So the card looks very, very similar. I've seen my card, and I've seen what a state employee's card looks like. They are very similar. So, I just want to flag that for folks, that confusion could continue regardless of how this gets written. So for that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions or give you back a couple of minutes in your day.
Senator Whitley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for taking my question. I'm trying to clarify whether this is already an existing mandate under ACA.
So I think the first part of the bill where it's the initial blood screen because New Hampshire has, let me get the right terminology. Because New Hampshire under RSA 130A is a universal testing state, therefore under the ACA, that initial blood test is considered a preventative service and therefore is or should be being provided without a cost share. So that would be current law. And as Alex indicated, you kind of have to go through a couple of steps to get there, but he's confirmed that with CMS. So that would be current law. I think the part that's unclear is whether follow-up testing under the ACA is considered preventative service or not, and therefore would or would not have a cost share. And so if you put it into New Hampshire law, that will take care of the fully insured carrier, fully insured plans, but you won't be able to capture with that net the self-funded plans.
Follow up. So now I understand that first test is a preventive service, should be covered under ACA requirements, no co-pays. So is it necessary to sort of figure out what I heard testimony is that there were co-pays being required? Do we need to pay those parents back?
From the commercial carrier's perspective, I'm not aware that copays were being required. I guess that's something that you'd have to talk to the insurance department about in terms of doing a market conduct exam or looking into it, looking into the all payers claims database. I don't know but I'm not aware that this is an expansive problem with the copays. From the commercial carrier's perspective, I can't speak for the fully insured commercial. I can't speak for the self-funded plans.
I do have a question. Do you have, you may not be the right person, but do you have any idea how many people we're talking about at this point? Is it a very small percentage?
Small percentage of people who may have been charged a copay for the initial screening. I don't have any sense of that. No, I don't.
Okay.
Don't.
How about a percentage of those tested positive for lead?
I don't have that information either. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not.
That's fine.
Not my area of expertise.
I figured I was asking the wrong person. But
Yeah. I mean, I did want to say, getting back to Senator Whitley's question, given the guidance, what makes it a preventative, that initial screening, a preventative service in New Hampshire is the fact that we have designated ourselves as a universal testing state. So with my understanding is that in the absence of that designation, the guidance from I'm trying to remember the name of it, the United States Preventative Services Task Force, and I think there are a couple of other that have given guidance. It's only, you would do a risk screening first, like a survey essentially, to try to figure out, is the child potentially at risk of lead exposure or not. And in those other states where they don't have that designation, it's only the children who are identified as high risk that then would get that initial blood screening. So it's because of New Hampshire's, I think, our housing stock that we've obviously taken that step to
Yeah,
be
I think
designated.
it's important to find out that information. 'Cause, I'm aware of 2 carriers that have charged copays, and I personally know of a friend who's been charged. So I think it's important to really get a handle, because I think it is happening despite
Yeah.
the requirements of existing federal law.
Yeah, and I'll say that, I mean, the New Hampshire law is confusing because, like I said, it does read that benefits provided under this section shall not be subject to any greater copayment, deductible, or coinsurance than any other similar benefits provided by the insurer. So that was just a parity requirement. It was not a no copay requirement. And this, the fact, like I said, the fact that New Hampshire, it's not obvious, it's not an obvious set of steps that because New Hampshire is designated as a universal testing state. So I can see why there has been confusion.
I can try and connect with the insurance department and see if they have those numbers.
Yeah, I think that's important because the requirement to not do copays is actually a federal law requirement, not a state law requirement, despite the New Hampshire law being unclear. It's federal law.
All right, I'll talk to the insurance department and see if they can get those numbers. All right. Heidi, we're on the hot seat, so say thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Last speaker is Dawn McKinney.
I think I've been last. More than yeah, done enough to be last. I'm good. We just support the bill.
Okay.
Legal system. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone here that would like to speak on 399 that has not been given the opportunity? With that, I will close the hearing on 399, and we are going to be opening our last bill shortly.
Did it.
Here goes Sue.
Nope. All right,
That's
I'm just
mine.
gonna leave from here. Thank you.
I need to go home. I am, my head is
Really?
pounding, yeah. Oh.
Cam, that sounds awful. You need to get some, Cam, you need antibiotics for that cough.
Wow.
Are we taking magnesium,
I take it.
zinc?
I don't take
Like,
Poor Cam.
kind of, there's all different kinds of magnesium. Depends if they-
Cam.
I take it for leg cramps.
Which one? There's 12 different kinds.
That sounds like it hurts your poor chest.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And, vitamin E, vitamin D3.
Cam, I'm gonna
It's
mom you.
only
Don't let that go,
flu.
because it can become pneumonia, so go get it checked
Yay.
out.
Yeah.
We're
Drink a
gonna
lot of
mom
water,
you,
too.
we're gonna mom you a little bit.
Oh, mine was Are you ready, Cam? All right. I am going to open a hearing on Senate Bill 497 and welcome the prime sponsor, Senator Bradley. Mr.
Good
President.
afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Hopefully a very simple, quick bill. I was asked by the Department of Health and Human Services to file Bill 497. What this does, it creates a separate, non-lapsing, dedicated account where the department can collect the revenue that is disproportionate share hospital payment and creates a process through a separate account so that the DHS money can be allocated in a much more efficient, transparent, and timely manner. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services requires now that the disproportionate share hospital exam is completed each fiscal year, and they require that to determine the proper amount of dish money owed to each hospital. So once the exam is completed, the department collects the funds that were paid in excess of the amount a hospital was entitled to in accordance with the approved Medicaid plan amendment, and then these excess payments, once completed, are redistributed to eligible hospitals in the manner outlined in the Medicaid state plan. So this fund would be dedicated. It would only receive funds from hospitals that are in excess dish payments and paying them to hospitals which are eligible to receive the money. Accordingly, because the funds that are received will be paid out to other hospitals, this legislation is cost neutral to the state. So, this is my favorite fiscal note of the day. All zeros, no cost.
They all came in yesterday, or the day before.
Are you done?
Yes.
Any questions? From the
Yeah, it's dark. I'm done.
It's the end of the day.
Any questions from the committee?
John Williams and others are here from the department if there are any specific questions.
Thank you, Senator.
Yep.
Henry Littman is on here, but I know he's not here. You're welcome, fill in for Henry.
So for the record, Robert Berry, I'm General Counsel of the Division of Medicaid for the department. Senator Bradley outlined what this really does very well. It's very simple. Hospitals that receive excess dish money owe the money back to this fund, and then the hospitals that were underpaid, because it's a finite pot of money that it all goes to the hospitals. It's just a matter of how it's proportioned. So the hospitals that were underpaid, they get the money that comes back from the hospitals that are overpaid, and in the end, it's zero. So that's all we're trying to do here, is just make it a little bit easier and more transparent, and just to make the process more streamlined. I'm happy to take any more specific questions. I know you guys have had a long day.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wait.
the one thing I did not add, this is not a question, this is not reauthorization of the Dish Met settlement. This is totally separate, it's just a dedicated fund to allocate the Dish payment.
Correct.
The other legislation dealing with presumably the Met Dish issue.
Correct. This is just for everything we've done in the past.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other, is there anyone here that would like to speak on Senate Bill 497 but wasn't given the opportunity? All right, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 497. And we are done.
Wow. Before 5, Madam Chair.
Just, yeah.
Thank you. Well done.
Do we have to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.